I hereby call the City of Lloydminster regular council meeting for the City of Lloydminster to order at this time. At this time, we'll take a silent moment of personal reflection. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Lloydminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. Not seeing any note, I will ask, is there any additions or deletions to this agenda at this time? Not seeing any, I will look to council for direction on item 3, the approval of the agenda as presented. Councilor Button.
Move that the agenda dated February 24th, 2020 be approved.
Seconded. Councilor Bagan. Any further discussion before calling for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 4, the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. I'll look to council for direction. Councilor Buckingham.
Move that the regular council minutes dated February 10th, 2020 be approved.
Seconded. Councilor Baker. Any discussion on those minutes at this time? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Is there any business arising from those minutes? None noted. Moving on to item number 6, public presentations. We have a representative that I'll call forward. That's Ms. Jose Devaney. Come forward and speak. Ms. Devaney is speaking on the Centrail Rodale School Board presentation. I'd like to just remind you, Ms. Devaney, you have 5 minutes. I would ask you to remain at the end of 5 minutes to answer any questions from council, if there's any questions or information required that you didn't present.
Okay, thank you very much. So once again, my name is José Devaney. Thank you for having me here today. I am the Secretary-Treasurer for the Conseil Scolaire Centre-Nord. The real official name is the Francophone Regional Authority of the Greater North Central Francophone Education Region. Later on your agenda today, you will be asked to consider a bylaw to grant a property tax exemption for École Sans Frontières, a Francophone school operated by our board and located at 4204 54th Avenue here in Lloydminster. What is a Francophone school, you may ask? Well, I'm here to hopefully provide answer to that question and tell you a little bit about us. We've provided you with a little bit of information in your meeting package for today. But who are we? We are publicly funded schools, just like Lloydminster School Division, Lloydminster Catholic School Division, or Edmonton Public School, or Edmonton Catholic. Except we are Francophone. We are publicly funded. We follow the Alberta curriculum. The difference is everything we do is in French, except English language arts that doesn't start until grade 3 for our students. So all programs of studies, all report cards, all communications with parents between school and teachers are in French. These schools are meant to be a French environment, promoting the French language and culture. Under the Charter of Rights, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, Canadians have the right to have their children educated in the official language of the minority, either French and English. So I'm sure here there's no question that French is the minority. In 1994, the governance of the schools were granted to the minority. Like historically, I know in Edmonton, they were, the Francophone schools were operated by the Catholic school boards. In 1994, the governance of the school was granted to Francophone school authorities, where the courts have stated that the management of the school should be given to the minority, and the majority should not decide what the priorities of the minority were. So in 1994, the Conseil Scolaire Centre-Nord was created, which means this year we're celebrating 25 years of Francophone education. In the history of education, that means we are newcomers. What does that mean for us? It means we do not have a long history of acquiring school sites, school buildings. We're just starting to be included in discussions with the various planning departments of all the municipalities that we deal with in order to obtain designated school sites where Francophone school can be built right at the planning stage. So we're now starting to be included when municipalities discuss their area structure plans and neighborhood structure plans. We started with 4 schools and we have now 19. How did we do that? Well, when we look to open a schools, and quite often it's following requests from parents that are right holders under the charter, or if one of our schools is overcrowded, we start by asking surrounding school boards for any available space. Do they have schools that are closed or unused? Do they have any available space in their current school? When nothing is available, we have to look elsewhere. We have been very creative. Over the years, we've rented all sorts of different spaces. We've opened a junior, senior high school in the basement of a senior citizen home in St. Albert. We've rented community space in Legal, Alberta to have additional classrooms and have access to a gymnasium. We are renting commercial condominiums in Beaumont so that it was like 6 little houses on a separate area so the kids can have a little bit of a schoolyard and an area. In another school, we were able to install portables on an existing school site so that the existing school would be able to share their gymnasium. Currently, we lease space for 6 schools. 2 schools are leased from other boards. 1 space is in a community center. And we lease 4 different spaces for 3 different schools from private owners. Leasing is a temporary solution for us. We're working hard to obtain permanent spaces for our schools. Currently, 3 of the schools that we lease space from have capital projects at different stages of design and development. Construction should begin on 2 of these projects shortly. So renting space is not an ideal solution for us, but it allows us to offer Francophone programming that wouldn't otherwise be available. Therefore, we respectfully ask that you treat our school like any other school and exempt it from property tax. We actually believe that our school is an asset for the city of Lloydminster. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I will now look to council for any questions that they may have. Councilor Monroe.
So, just in reviewing this, so you asked that your school be treated like any other school. So anybody can come and attend this school. I have 4 young children, and whether or not I I can enroll them in the public school division, or I can enroll them in Catholic. Even if they choose not to be Catholic, they just sign a waiver saying that they understand that they will be taught this in the Catholic school system. So can I enroll my children in your school system?
It's a little bit, the rights of the Catholics are a little bit like the rights of the Francophone. When you attend a Catholic school, you say, you accept that your student will be taught the Catholic religion. So it's the same kind of idea. The Francophone school were created to protect the Francophone minority and to make it vibrant and growing. So it's kind of the same thing. Normally you have to be from Francophone origin or Francophone descent. We recognize like lots of places in Saskatchewan of Alberta were founded by Francophone people coming from Quebec, lots of small farming communities. So when the Charter of Rights came into effect, it was to protect those minorities the same way that the Catholic school were founded to protect the Catholic rights. So it's the same kind.
So sorry, I can enroll my child going into kindergarten in your school as long as I agree to that they are taught the Francophone curriculum. Is that correct?
You'd have to be a right holder. So
Okay,
there's
so there is-
conditions. There are conditions, but it's still a protection of the minority right under the Charter.
So if I'm just correct, there are restrictions in terms of you have to be of Francophone descent. What I'm saying is the difference between the Catholic school division is you do not have to be of Catholic descent. You just have to be willing for that curriculum to be taught to your children. But in the Francophone, that would be the difference, is that not any public individual can enroll in your school. Is that correct, or is there a misconception here?
There are three criteria, and I'm sorry I don't have the charter in front of me to tell you what the criteria are. But the way it's been interpreted is also to say, the Francophone school, the reason for being of the Francophone school is to protect and enrich the Francophone community. So you have to have a commitment to the Francophone community. Same as you have to have a commitment to the Catholic education. Now, we'll ask that you speak French. We'll ask that you commit to your teaching your students in French. The charter applies only to Canadian citizens. So there's conditions in the charter. I'm not creating those conditions.
So I guess I would argue that those conditions do not make it available for anyone to attend your school. And for me, that is a bit of a difference between attending the public school division or the Catholic school division, because those schools, you really do encompass that anyone can attend those, whether you or not you are a legal Canadian citizen or not. If you're residing in our country, then you are able to attend those schools. So for me, there's a little bit of discrepancy, I guess. Maybe perhaps I should read the whole charter, but there is a little bit of a difference when you voice that you're equal and that anyone can attend. Really, anyone can attend, but would be my discrepancy there. So
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Diachek would like to comment.
Yeah, a couple things. One is that the Catholic system is very similar to yours, and that the court case in Saskatchewan ruled that the protection of access for Catholic students is only for Catholic students. And part of the challenge in Saskatchewan currently is that public students are actually accepted in there, and schools are being built to accept either or. And so it's a debate around infrastructure and all the other pieces. So there are similarities because the Catholic education is protected for Catholic students. And one of the tests typically is a baptismal certificate. That's become much more lax in terms of how it's being practiced now, but it's being challenged from a funding perspective in different provinces, in part because of infrastructure costs, which tend to be one of the biggest costs in terms of moving forward with education. I would agree with one of your comments, however, that we are a better community, a richer community by having public, Catholic, and Francophone schools. And my history in working with Francophone schools, the primary piece that really was front and center was having the heritage. It's coming from the Francophone background, however it's defined. And I usually never get it quite right, so I'm not even going to try to do that. But I think certainly the only questions that I had in particular, is that looking at the capital plan from 2010. In that document from Alberta was a section, I think it was section either 193 or 93, that talked about the triple net, which included the lease cost, the tax cost, and the other pieces. And subsequently, that's changed in 2015. So now the funding is a pool, and not everybody's getting the full amount, and that's part of the challenge we face today, where the provincial government has actually downloaded those costs onto the taxpayers. And so while we may enjoy Francophone education, we also have to pay for it. beyond what we currently pay. And that's part of our challenge now. So, because we all pay one education tax, which initially sets up the funds to pay for capital costs, but now we're being asked as ratepayers to pay even more beyond that. And as any other community, it would be in the same boat you are. So it is not a fault of yours, it is a fault of the funding process. And I think that's part of the challenge for communities across the province.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for bearing around. It's good. I don't know a great deal about the inner workings of school systems, but in the documents provided, the inclusive or exclusive. And this particular set of notes said this is not an inclusive school. You have to be of origin of a certain ethnic group or nationality to attend. Is that correct? That's what it says in here.
Well, the Charter of Rights, the Canadian Charter of Rights on which these schools are based, say that these rights are for Canadian citizens. So,
I guess that's what it says here. And somebody printed this and published it publicly. And it says you have to be of a certain origin to go to school. I know many kids that go to private schools. And to me, this is a private school. Simple as that. And we pay a lot of fees to send kids to private schools. But mom and dad pay that. Our city taxpayers today pay for public schools, 2 of them, including one that provides French immersion, which is great. We pay a fee for seamless education over and above that. So both Saskatchewan and all that. My learned friend Michael will talk on that more than I would. But to balance the curriculums, so both Saskatchewan and Alberta can be serviced with one or the other, or the benefits of one or the other, if that's the way you'd like to put it. And we pay that over and above our normal taxes that are applied by Alberta. And that's to level the playing field. At the end of the day is, under Copter rules of assessment, this school does not apply. Is that the way it is? It just doesn't apply. And I don't know why we would be responsible, because the Alberta government won't pay for the taxes for your schools. The way I understand it, it certainly won't pay for it here. I don't know the whole story, but I do know that to download for 25 students, $17,000 onto the general taxpayers of the city, whether they be of the same descendants that are going to that school or not, they get stuck with the tax bill. And my simple math says it's $680 per student if we get 25 students per annum without any increases. And that's an ongoing annual cost to the taxpayers. So I don't know how we differentiate this from private school to public school. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor. Just like to remind Council, we need to, if there's questions, and I appreciate your comments, Councilor, I think that if there's, in relation to the bylaws coming forward, I think these are all good discussions, but I'd like to, for Ms. Deputy's time and our time, questions, if there's any particular questions, we're looking for more information. Councilor,
Sorry.
Source first, and then Councilor.
Thank you, and thanks for your presentation. I apologize if I appeared to be slightly distracted. I caught 95% of it, so I can do 2 things at once very well. My question was just, within Alberta, do you have this particular issue in any single jurisdiction other than Lloydminster, or is this more a reflection of our charter? Is this an issue anywhere else?
it's a reflection of the charter, because the charter says own and operate. I don't own the building and have to lease it. In Alberta, in our other municipalities, we haven't had to pay property taxes.
Thank you.
Councilor Belcher.
Yeah, so do you have students from Saskatchewan attending?
We have a few.
So what funding would you access from Saskatchewan relative to the leasing and space?
I might have to get back to you on that, because I believe that they give us their basic funding, but because the school is operated by us, Alberta is to provide capital funding. I think that's how it works, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'd rather provide further information on that.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that, in the end, when there's funding from capital projects, one of the pieces that Saskatchewan uses and Saskatchewan Education uses is they look at the proportion of students that are either Saskatchewan or Alberta residents, and then use that ratio as a means to fund. And I would certainly encourage you to look at, there's funding that in Alberta used to be called EQRP and then IMR, and so
Yes.
there's all those acronyms
Yes.
that are in there, and I'm trying to forget them because that's no longer my life. But I'm also aware that there are other funding models that may be able to support the program that we're doing. I'm going to add was that your scenario that you're in is not unlike anybody else that leases public space in Saskatchewan as a public school. So that the funding that is used for Francophone schools is not just for Francophone leases, but it's used for every facility that is not identified as a school proper. So if you're running an outreach school in downtown Edmonton and it's not owned by the city, they access lease dollars on the same formula that is being applied here in this instance. And in the new capital plan, it simply says it's a pooled fund, and you get X amount of dollars, and whatever is over, you're on your own. And I mean, one of the examples I think is Beaumont. It's in a similar scenario, but it might be just with Francophone. But I mean, in the past, that 2010 capital plan said triple net was all in. I think this is one of the cost-cutting measures that everybody's being hit with. So anybody has an outreach school, anybody's renting a facility, they're in the same boat, whether you're Francophone, Catholic, public, pick any description you have there. But I would certainly recommend looking and contacting Saskatchewan.
We are in constant contact with Saskatchewan because we share the funding, the cost for busing and teachers and everything else.
Okay. So yeah, it would be interesting to see what they provide for facilities as well.
So we can leave you with that. If you'd like to contact the legislative services of the city with that information going back, as discussed, that'd be terrific. Any other questions for the speaker? Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate the presentation. Thank you. Moving on to 7.7, new business, and Office of City Clerk with the City Manager.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. To present 7.1.1 Assessment Review Board Member Appointments, I'll ask Scott Perry to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Scott.
The recommendation to Council grant Gerald Albers, Fagin, Larry Sauer, Brian Kimball, Darren Taylor as Assessment Review Board members for the City of Lloydminster for a 3-year period ending December 31st, 2022. Administration is requesting the Council authorize the appointment of 5 Assessment Review Board members for the City of Lloydminster. In accordance with bylaw number 01-2015, Section 2A, the City of Lloydminster requires a resolution to appoint members to the local Assessment Review Board and the Council Assessment Review Board. ARB members are required to receive training prescribed by the Alberta Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000 M26, and the matters relating to assessment rate regulation. Gerald Albers and Glenn Fagnan have completed the ARB certificate training provided by the Alberta Municipal Government Board. Larry Sauer, Brian Kimball, and Darren Taylor will have completed ARB certification provided by the Alberta Municipal Government Board in March 2020. The ARB board members will be subject to policy number 134-03, business expense and travel policy, and policy number 120-03, council remuneration policy. Options that council grant: Gerald Albers, Glenn Fagnan, Larry Sauer, Brian Kimball, and Darren Taylor as Assessment Review Board members for the City of Lloydminster for a 3-year period ending December 31st, 2022. Or the council not appoint Gerald Albers, Glenn Fagnan, Larry Sauer, Brian Kimball, and Darren Taylor as Assessment Review Board members. I'll pass back to you, Your Worship, for questions or comments.
Thank you, Scott. Questions or comments? Councilman Rowe.
Just a quick question to round out this review board. Is there also City of Lloydminster employees on that?
No, we can't have
No?
employees on
Okay.
board. It has to be third-party people on there.
For clarification, if I may, Scott, a clerk could be a member of the city administration to take notes, but the actual board of 3 members, correct, would not be able to be a city employee directly as a city employee versus a member of council. And I also go further, only 1 member of council can sit on that board at a time. So it's either myself or Councillor Fagnan if the board was to be convened and we were called upon. Only one of us can be on the board with 2 non-elected officials.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Quick question, Scott, Are we losing some people, or is it just a renewal after 3 years?
We actually had mostly council members who were on board, and so we went out to the public to look for some people that were not tied to taxes and assessment within the city making the decisions. So like Mayor Elvis just said, the new requirement under the MGA is for one city council member, and that's not necessarily our council member, that could be any council member in Alberta. If they're sitting on the board, they can't be part of it. The charter still allows for more than that, but we're trying to take the higher grounds. So it's not that we've lost any members, we just didn't have any.
And there is a recertification, or you have to go through the course on a fairly regular basis to stay up to what's going on with it. So,
I would just say appreciate people doing this work, because I have absolutely no interest in doing it, so. a lot of people do.
I caught Councillor Fagin on a good day, I can tell you.
I'll make that motion, actually.
If there's no further questions, I will take questions for Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to be clear for those that might not know, and maybe for myself, with the city election coming up this fall, these aren't council-appointed positions necessarily. The mayor and Councillor Fagin's positions would remain in that 3-year term, regardless of whether they were sitting on the council.
That's correct.
Just so everybody knew that.
Yep.
Thanks, Councillor. Good question. Now I'll entertain any
All right.
questions.
Move that council appoint Gerald Elders, Glenn Fagin, Larry Sauer, Brian Kimmel, and Vern Taylor as assessment review board members. I want to state really quick, for the city of Lloydminster for a 3-year period ending December 31st, 2022.
Second, Councillor Thorson. Any further discussion or debate before Councillor and I leave? Not seeing any, all in favor?
Thank you.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, John. Moving on to the agenda to 7.2 to Chief Financial Officer, City Manager.
Thank you, Worship. Our 7.2.1, 2019 capital carry forward, unless our CFO needs to present.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Before you is the 2019 capital carry forward projects in the amount of $17,085,697. The City of Lloydminster's audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st is not yet complete, and a resolution is required to give administration the authority to complete the 2019 capital work expected to be finished in the 2020 budget year. The capital carry forward projects are listed in the attachment and require council's approval. As part of the city's financial management and accountability framework, the 2019 capital carry forward list is submitted to ensure appropriate approvals are in place to continue the capital work. So if we look at the attachment, you will see in that attachment that there's the capital project number, the description. The first column is the 2019 budget that was approved and the 2019 actuals to date, a variance dollar budget remaining, and the variance budget spent by a percentage. So then the last column shows the carry forward totaling $17,085,697. With that, if you have any questions, we're looking for approval of that carry forward amount into 2019.
Thank you, CFO. Question, Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, some of these seems pretty straightforward as to the amounts and why they're being carried forward and everything. It makes a lot of sense. The one big question I had is the $500,000 in difference between the budget remaining and then the amount that we're carrying forward. So then, if you look at the budget remaining, it's $17,500,600, and then what we're actually carrying forward as a reserve is $17,085,000. So is there $500,000 worth of projects that we're not doing anymore?
If I remember properly, we were looking at that on Friday, and it was to do with a grant. We applied a grant against the project, and so that's a good segue into saying that all of this carry forward is supported by grant revenue, so it would not be 2020 tax dollars going against these projects. It will be carry forward from reserve and/or reserves revenue sources.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, the tax on all these projects happened once, or the revenue happened once via grant, and it's not, coming up again. It's not new revenue needed to complete any of these things. We've already got all the money for it. Yeah, no, that makes sense then. Thank you.
I guess it's a question slash comment. Comment is, thank you for the report. We have $9 million in the budget for the wastewater treatment plant to help move this along. Very little was actually spent in physical dollars in 2019. Hasn't changed the price. It's simply due to the budgetary process, we've had to move that money forward to 2019, from 2019 to 2020. A good portion of it, I suspect, or maybe more, will be spent in 2020 as we move forward with the project. But there are some projects, as I looked here, or approvals. Some of those items actually started in 2019. The process, procurement may have started, but there was no physical dollars spent. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
A good example of that would be the signage project. We've started on it, we've made movement on it, but there's no invoices that have come in. So we have to carry it forward so we can continue those projects.
Okay. And there will be, I imagine, roads and operational type things as work was started. There's holdbacks and things like that in place until the warranty is, or the springtime is finished and things like that. So that's, I'm sure people wonder why we didn't spend $17 million in capital, but some of it was in play, timing of when it was spent, and certainly a good portion of $8.2 million is wastewater treatment plant that we're going to be talking about in the near future. Councilor Patrick.
Did you want to go first?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure, just add that some of the programs are multi-year. When you have asphalt underground going on there, AE requirements to carry over significant dollars for future asphalt process.
Thanks, Worship. Yeah, the only thing I guess that sort of pops out of me is the number of projects that we spent no money on or done zero completion on. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around, and a lot of them are not big as well, 50,000, 40,000, 10,000, whatever it is. So how do we avoid that, I guess, if they're important enough to get on the list and we see them as making sure that we see them as a priority, and a year's gone by roughly and we're still at zero.
Finance certainly felt that we're being a little more conservative in bringing forward the list and with the effort to say approve it. If they choose to not continue with it, it might be canceled at a later date. If there's significant amount of money that needs to be canceled, we'll bring it back to council.
Yeah, is that like, so water treatment plant, clarifier drive replacement, 190,000, we've done nothing with that, and that, so.
Yeah, I mean, that one was held over for reasons of good nature. The ASCII operators doing a major shutdown this year, so we delayed that project to reduce our impact on that shutdown. So
it's just part of it is from my perspective, it's planning and managing our money, and there seems to be a lot of zeros on here, 0% ones. So I don't know whether it's manpower to be able to go and do it, or time of the year, because there's some on the golf course, and there's ice resurfacer in there, and so it kind of varies from season to season as well. So.
yeah, I mean, the ice resurfacer, for example, it's coming. It just
Not here.
purchase
Oh,
and the delivery didn't occur in 2019, so the work was done. Just the invoice didn't occur in 19.
So we
There's many different reasons why projects are carried over into full year payment required further on. I understand what you're saying,
yeah,
Councilor.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around this.
We do our best to ensure that whatever capital we are asking for is attainable and required, and we're going to do it. I think that was a focus through this 2020 budget when we allocated capital funds.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about that carryover list? Thank you very much, CFO. I will look for direction from council. There's no other questions regarding the 2019 capital carry forward. Councilor McKeon.
Move the council approve the 2019 capital carry forward projects to be completed in the 2020 budget year in the amount of $17,085,697.
Seconder, Councilor Thorson. Any further questions or comments before I call for the final question? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 7.2.2, back to you, City Manager, through the CFO.
So our second item is the 2019 year-end surplus allocation. The overall surplus at this time, so we're in a bit of transition in that this is a new step in our process going forward, as we want to bring forward the capital carry forwards and we want to bring forward the year-end allocations. Our year-end numbers are in its infancy stage. The auditors are coming in this week. We know that these numbers aren't perfect yet. We know that there's year-end entries yet to be done, and so we're using kind of estimated numbers at this point, and we want to firm them up at a later date. So the overall surplus of 7.2 is being proposed to be allocated to operating and capital reserves. Any amounts in excess of that, in general, will fall to the accumulated surplus, and we're asking for a resolution to complete the year-end surplus allocations. In accordance with the new City Lloydminster Reserve policy, we are presenting the annual year-end surplus allocation proposal from the City Manager and Executive Leadership Team to Council for approval based on the following and subsequent to the capital carry forward allocations. First of all, we want to support the operating reserves to their established maximum, which is 10%. Any remaining surplus balances would be forwarded to the department's capital reserve unless otherwise allocated by the executive leadership team or by council. And in the event that a department is in a deficit position, a draw from reserves may be proposed to address the deficit. So like I said, we haven't followed that this year because we are not real confident in revenue and expenses for each particular department in detail. So in the fact that we are just trying to establish these reserves, the city manager and the ELT team met and we allocated the amounts to reserves. And certainly council has the opportunity now to change those if you so choose. A department can maintain an operating reserve equivalent to 10% of their operating budget, and any amount above this ceiling is allocated into a capital reserve. Council shall take note that these numbers are subject to change until the audit is fully completed. For instance, any contingency liabilities will require an entry to the operating and will affect the overall surplus. And that will be later in the year-end process. In addition, administration will be monitoring that their reserves are funded by verifying the following formulas held true, and we will have that calculation for you as part of the financial statements when we bring forward the audited financial statements. With that, we can now go to the attachment, and I'll walk you through the attachment. So the first box shows our restricted reserves, so none of those reserves are affected by this allocation. And the first half is operating, so you'll see the targeted 10% budget allocated for each area of the operating reserves that are our typical operating reserves. And under the proposed surplus allocation, we're saying $270,000 to general government, $310,000 to protective services, $250,000 to transportation services, $10,000 to public health and welfare, $290,000 to economic development, and $250,000 to rec and culture. I've indicated the 2018 restated balances for the reserves when council reallocated the reserves mid-year in 19, and indicate the 19 budgeted contribution for an expected balance, of course excluding any costs from, because that hasn't been done in our books yet. Under the special operating category, we've put $1 million towards land division, as that reserve didn't have a balance at this point, and if we were to use look for opportunities to purchase any land, it would come under that department. When we look at the capital side of things, we are allocating $2,270,000 to the general government. So included in that area is council's capital priorities. And we are looking at increasing that substantially in order to help support the capital projects council has to make for the future. 250,000 to protective services, 250,000 to transport services, 100,000 to the cemetery. That cemetery operating side is grouped with FCSS and community programs, which of course don't have capital work, and so it sits by itself on the capital side. Planning and economics, or rec and culture has $1 million going to it because we know that there's a number of capital projects coming up in that area also. We've put 200,000 to equipment fleet reserve, 250,000 to road infrastructure. Most of our infrastructure are covered by grants. 500,000 to the LCSC reserve. And I guess we're open for questions if you have need further information on those allocations.
Thank you, CFO, Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just my first question, the kind of item that jumped up to me is the targeted maximums that we have listed in the orangish color. What we end up getting on the expected balances, there's some that are higher, so we could actually allocate less and still meet that standard if you were to decide to allocate less to protective services, let's say, and it would meet that standard. And I'm just curious, was there any specific reason why we allocated it evenly across them, or was there anything in mind?
I know that the protective services budget, so that 10% is based on their budget for 2020. This particular numbers are the 19 budget, so I know that that bottom line, that 10% will increase next year. In addition, RCMP, we are expecting an invoice for retro pay with the RCMP union agreement, as well as that will cover any additional items required in the fire hall. So the fire hall is covered by a capital purchase, but if there's anything included that we need to house in there, say furniture, equipment, we will be looking for some kind of reserve to pull some money to support some of that.
Okay, thank you. Good that.
That explains it very well. I had a very similar question to call, Councilor. Any other questions or comments from council? So Denise, again, we have what we call restricted reserves. So those are set. The council has to spend that money on those particular items. Is that correct?
They are restricted in their purpose. So depending on you'll see later on in the council agenda that we're pulling some money from an off-site reserve. Those reserves can only be used for a certain purpose. And so we have to be careful what we can use that money for. So the bid, that's going to be, that was taxes levied to the downtown area for downtown development. So we would only use that money for downtown development.
Okay. And that's why they are being restricted versus the unrestricted gives a lot more, I guess, openness from council as well as administration to where they may request that money from. Certainly, we're not in, it's a good spot, and the question we'll ask CFO is, how did we get to this? Because people are going to say, you taxed us, and you had a budget, and you came up with excess. So it's operational. I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from the administration so that I'm not leading this meeting. So how would you?
So overall, so the operating is sitting at 7.2, no, that's wrong, 5.2 million surplus in the operating. And the capital is sitting at 2 million surplus. So we have worked hard with the staff to tighten the budget for 2020. This is a good thing for council that there is a surplus because we are not budgeting to put money into reserves. So the only way we're going to increase the reserve balances for this year and 2020 is that we have surpluses. So I understand your concern. However, it is good that we have this, that we can top up these reserves because we have a considerable amount of work to do in the future, and we will be relying on our reserves in order to fund those projects.
Thank you, and that's the answer I was hoping I'd hear. So really, the operational side of the city has worked very hard to obtain a $2.38 million saving, which I compliment the administration for that, and the staff out every day out working in this city, providing the services that our residents have come to know and appreciate. We've done it for less money than budget, which I appreciate, and they've saved where they can, and that's much appreciated. And if I can get into the capital reserves, we often have the discussion around this table when we come in under budget or over budget, but we don't talk a lot about under budget. But this is a lot of those projects that were tendered last year that came in under budget. Is that a good scenario for that capital money?
Yes, there's some projects that were chosen not to move forward with.
Okay, and I appreciate your comment. I think that we have a huge infrastructure in our city, and I don't want to talk about a deficit per se, but we do have a $500 million worth of assets that we have to maintain, and we're going to be discussing some of them later in this council meeting, and I'm sure we'll continue to discuss them as long as this council's serving at this table, and it'll be discussed by councils going forward to maintain and to improve the quality of life in this city. It takes capital. Everything that we touch in the big, be it an arena, be it a swimming pool, be it whatever project the city so deems, including streets and repaving and things like that, those are capital items. So appreciate having a little bit of room to work with. Council Torres.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just wanted to double check on one thing before I make this statement, but I know you're still partway through the audit, but all of the reserves that we have here are all fully funded, like there's cash to support them somewhere?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, when I look at you know, the goings on of the city operations and council and where we've been at in the past, and looking back a few years when there was $27 million write-offs because there was not actually the cash to support the reserves that we had on paper. You know, I think we're in a much better place than we are now. And as Mayor Albers talks about our $500 million in assets that we manage and maintain right now, and then we look at all the master plans that we have that have another $500 million that need to be replaced over the next 10 to 15 years or 20 years, whatever the number is, we can't do it all in one day. And as much as I'm not a fan of budgets being padded, which I don't believe is what happened here, this is just where cost savings are found. They are put in the bank and they're saying, okay, this will help us tackle our $500 million problem of the assets we need to replace in the not so distant future. So, you know, it's a good problem to have that you ended up with money left over and you've got places to allocate it towards, and then you've got some spots for capital for it to sit and replace other assets. So I think we're in a much better spot than we were when we were first elected 3 years ago, or where they were just before that, when there was $27 million write-offs of the reserve balances because there wasn't the cash to support them. So thank you very much for the report, and yeah, it's a good place to be right now. Well, better place to be.
Councilor Baker.
Your Worship, the swing in the economy in the last few years, I'm sure it's made it really hard to budget. But in any case, I don't know how many kilometers of old pipeline have we still got in the ground. And I'm sure we could spend it all tomorrow. So some of these essential services, we would have to borrow, or we have some money to put towards it. Like a firewall, underground sewer. We got a $80 million wastewater treatment plant to pay for. Granted, we got some, no pun intended, some grants to help out, but we're still on the hook for, what is it, 30 or 30 million dollars. So we may have a surplus on paper right now, but I'm not sure we have a big surplus. If you look at the bills we're going to have to pay in the next while. We have a team working right now over at the Operations Center on designing the wastewater treatment plant. And the bills have started. So I know you've budgeted, but down the road we gotta 30-year payments to make on that water treatment plant. So I'm really happy to see that. You don't want to be here when it's the other way. Because it's stressful, especially stressful on administration, and it floods over on the council because you're trying to answer questions that you can't answer. So good job to everybody, and take those funds and spend it wisely on things that are actually needed in our city. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor, and I was surprised you didn't mention our federal and provincial friends, because we have two budgets that we still have to go through as a city. And I think having a little bit of excess in case, because no one knows until the budget document is actually tabled in the respective legislatures what's going to be left for our grant funding and things like that. So I think we're being on a positive note, and from the perspective of trying to be as good stewards of the taxpayers' money and their assets, because I think it's easy to see a tax bill on an annual basis, which we'll deal with in this council in due time. But when you think about the long-term capital investment that's been made, and I don't think anyone would want their street in front of their house might be valued at an amount and have to pay a tax, but if there's no street there, I think we'd be hearing about it from that perspective. I think this is all part and parcel to the much larger puzzle I like to describe. Everything fits together, it's just in pieces, and we deal with it on a regular basis here. So thank you for the comments. Is there any other questions or comments for the CFO? Not seeing any, I will look for direction from council on the 2019 year-end surplus allocation. Councilor Fagan.
The council approved the overall surplus of $7.2 million to be allocated as follows. Operating reserves, 2.380, $2,380,000. Capital reserves, $4,820,000. Accumulated surplus to be determined subject to audit adjustments. Additionally, that council authorizes the city manager and or delegate to amend the amounts according subject to audit adjustments.
Thank you, Councilor Seconder. Councilor Dowsett. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, CFO. And thank you for the good news. Moving on to agenda item 7.3, community services, city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 7.3.1, Heritage Building Sale of City-Owned Community Facility, I'll ask Tom Stanley to present.
Thank you, City Manager. Just before I start, I want to note an error in the recommendation. The address is 5001 50th Avenue, not 50th Street. I apologize for that. Administration is looking for a recommendation that Council direct administration to sell the Heritage Building, a city-owned community facility located at 5001 50th Avenue, Lloydminster, Saskatchewan. That sales agreement will be presented at a future council meeting for decision. Administration requests support to move forward with the listing of the Heritage Building, a city-owned facility located at 5001 50th Avenue, Lloydminster, for sale at market value. City Administration provided an update to committee during the October 21st, 2019 and February 18th, 2020 Governance and Priority Committee meetings regarding the Heritage Building. To bring the Heritage Building to a usable space for City of Lloydminster would be at an anticipated cost of $3 million plus or minus 3% contingency. These estimated dollars would provide space that could be utilized for office and or retail space. Currently, administration does not require this type of space. The purchase will have the flexibility to alter the interior of the Heritage Building to meet their needs, and that the outside facade will remain as is due to the Heritage designation. A couple options for council: that council direct administration to sell the building, or that council request additional information for the sale of the building. It's alignment with the strategic plan with the following areas: downtown revitalization, making small changes such as the sale of the Heritage Building will lend itself to revitalizing the city of Lloydminster's downtown, along with contributing to increasing the vibrancy and livability of future private investment in the downtown. And budget implications, 2018 market assessment was done on the building by MIT Appraisals. The assessed value or the appraised value of the building was $445,000. And it is anticipated that if this building was owned by a private owner, the estimated taxes as per condition today would be about $5,300. The one item council had requested when this was proposed at the governor's priority on February 15th was with regards to the DART. I've had discussions with administration, planning and engineering. Although there is discussion within the DART with regards to this being a city-owned facility, that the overall look and feel and policy direction of the DART would not have any impact on the owner of the building. So if there's any questions, Your Worship, I will do my best to answer as I can.
Thank you very much, as I can understand. Questions or comments? The one I may ask is the question that I've been asked, is it how close to $3 million needs to be done? And if it was bought by somebody else, and that's really going to be up to the building owner if they so acquire it, if that's what the council so chooses to sell it. You may not need to spend that much money, it's going to be subject to what they wanted to do, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The estimate was based on if the city was going to take a building in and put it into a viable space where we would be leasing, doing whatever we wanted to do with that, those would be the costs that we would need to incur. Some of those are tied to accessibility, building codes, those types of things. So there would be some costs that no matter who the owner is, they would be required to undertake, but we would have had a higher requirement.
Yeah, we would likely get the highest part of the bar, being a public facility in that respect. Appreciate that, thank you. Hope that clears the questions that were asked that I heard in the community was, well, anybody have to spend $3 million, it's really up to what they decide to purpose the building for if it is sold, and go from there, so. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Batchelor.
Yeah, we talked quite a bit about this in our GBC, and it's almost like you'd be replowing the field after it's been plowed and harrowed and disked and sowed already at this point. But I mean, I think overall, in the scheme of all our facilities that we do have, what's really abundantly clear is that we have a lot of buildings that need to be addressed. And even if we were to invest the $3 million into this property, the question would be is, what purpose would it really serve us relative to our current needs? And the answer was not very much, if any. And if we were to actually do the reno, then we would be in competition with other leaseholders or building holders in the city that are leasing property. And I think we've been pretty clear consistently that that's not our game. And there are enough people within the community that have property that do that end of the business very well, and we should stay out of the way and let them do that. So I think in view of that, the fact that we have those priorities, you know, that and the building is where it is, and it will still continue to be part of the downtown because of its status, it just makes good sense for us to move on this one and put it up for sale. So I would support that.
Councilor Thorson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This might sound similar thoughts, but just put slightly different. And when I look at this one at, you know, potentially $3 million to put it into a use that meets the city's standard as the owner. We've got the Cultural and Science Center that is, I don't know, $12 million to build a new one. Then you've got potentially a rink that could be, I don't know, $30 million to replace the Civic Center. And then you've got a wastewater treatment plant at $80 million, which $30 million of that will be ours. You've got, you know, we just keep adding them on, and we've got a new fire hall that's being built potentially for $10 to $11 million. So you add all those up and you see, okay, there's only one, or this is the only one that truly doesn't have any kind of city use in terms of our programs and services. So how can we rationalize potentially spending the $3 million it needs to bring it up to that standard, only so that we can turn around and rent it out? But then at that price, you will be renting it out at a value where you're not actually making money on the property because of what you just put into it. So it's just taxpayer-funded, subsidized rental unit, which there are plenty of other rental units available and some in the downtown, and it's just not fair to those other owners, as well as when you compound all the other things that need to be paid for in the next 10 years, potentially. So there's no financial sense of doing this any other way, in my opinion. than to put that building up for sale. Thank you.
Councilor Fair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm excited about this. I think that this is a great opportunity for an entrepreneur or developer to come in and work with a very unique building. So I think that that's what somebody's going to do and do a much better job than we are. We're not competing, so I think it's going to be positive for the downtown.
Thank you. Councilor Baker.
Well, Your Worship, I've said it before, when the building's worn out, it's worn out. And that one's worn out, unless you spend a lot of money. And I think the folks just said that a developer that had a use for it would put it to work, and I used an example, is the old City Hall building, just a block east. There was concern when that sold, and it's been occupied pretty much, I think, since it sold to the private sector. And it's been maintained basically in its same aesthetic condition. So as long as there's conditions on the sale to maintain the heritage site look, if you want to call it that, I think it's a great idea because we have no use for it, and you have to have the right kind of business to make that work. So I think it's a great idea, and let's make sure the public know. And if they don't know, you should by now, but make sure the public's aware of what direction we want to take, and hopefully everybody will, or most people will buy in, and we can get it done.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Fair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question regarding the sale of the building. Is that going to be going through the city? Or is it a real estate company that's going to be putting that on the market?
Executive Manager.
Yeah, thank you. We've done it a number of different ways with other buildings in the past. You know, the last one we sold in the downtown was the, what did we call it, emergency services building. We sold that through city. We just listed it and actually provided all the real estate agents within the city who had brought the sale for would essentially be provided that commission. So we have a number of ways of doing it. We could do it that same way we did that building. We could sell it privately ourselves. We could, so we'll figure that out. We'll do what makes most sense for the city in this case, and provide that out. If we are going to go to a real estate company, we would provide that offer to all in the city.
Any further questions? Not seeing any. I'll look for direction from the City Council on 7.3, Heritage Buildings, sale of city-owned community facility. Councilor Dutchek.
Move that council direct administration to sell the Heritage Building, a city-owned community facility located at 5001 50th Avenue, Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, and that the sales agreement be presented at a future regular council meeting for decision.
Thank you, Councilor. Seconder. Councilor Buckingham. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving to 7.3.2, City Manager. Through to Executive Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Before you, we have the Culture and Science Center, temporary location, and administration is looking for 3 recommendations from council. The first being that council direct administration to negotiate lease rates on a 10-year term for a facility that will provide space for a temporary relocation of the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center. And then number 2, that council approve the decommissioning of the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center facility located at 4515 44th Street, Saskatchewan, after temporary location of the LCSC occurs. And number 3, that council direct administration to consider applying for facility to be constructed on the existing site. Issues to facilitate temporary location of the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center along with the decommissioning of the current LCSC facility. Administration provided an update to the committee during the October 21st, 2019 and February 18, 2020 governance and priority committee meetings, and during the November 18, 2019 GPC meeting, the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center's building infrastructure and functional sprawl needs study, the feasibility study completed by Cornerstone Planning Group was presented. Studies conducted in recent years by multiple consultants, including S2 Architects and Cornerstone Planning Group, concluded that the LCSC has reached the end of its serviceable, usable lifespan. The studies confirmed that it is not feasible to renovate the current facility and that it requires significant functional, straddle, and aesthetic upgrades that would prove to be costly for the city of Lloydminster. The detailed LCSE condition assessment, which is attached to this report and posted publicly, which formed part of the LCSE's building infrastructure and functional straddle needs study, identified building deficiencies along with the applicable costs for rehabilitation. Estimated costs that would address specific objectives associated with the LCSE facilities, such as demolition of the booths, the OTS, the Richard Larson buildings, and upgrading the Bar Colony Heritage Facility to meet building codes, not including renovation costs, would be approximately $3.1 million as per the table below. Upgrading the Bar Colony Heritage Center building only would not provide sufficient space to allow for the traveling exhibits, LCSE artifacts display, or Lloydminster archives. It would only provide room for programming workspace as it was indicated in the Cornerstone study. Therefore, construction of the additional facility would be required. What we're getting at there, Your Worship, is under the Cornerstone plan, the building option that had renovate portion of the existing building plus an expansion included renovating that space to house our workshop area, mechanical and programming space. If we are going to meet the needs of what our facility is today, we would need to essentially build another expansion area to house our archives, traveling exhibits, and those portions. The feasibility study provides costs that include upgrading the existing Bar Colony Heritage Center building along with the addition of the facility, with $3.1 million required for upgrades to the existing building, which excludes renovation costs. An additional $11 million would be required to renovate and construct a new facility to the attached Bar Colony Heritage Building for a total construction cost of $14 million. It should be noted that an additional $3 million is required for on-site improvements, which would be applicable to all three options that were identified in the feasibility study. The option for renovation plus expansion is estimated to come in around $17 million. Administration is recommending a temporary solution to the Lloydminster Cultural Science Center to be relocated to a leased space in the short term, 10 years, in order for the LCSE to continue meeting its current and future service levels until a permanent facility can be constructed on its current site. By closing the current LCSE facility, services provided by the Heritage Society, Richard Larson Association, and LCSE Advisory Committee will not be interrupted due to its relocation. The only change is that the current LCSE facility will no longer be accessible to these groups. Moving the LCSE to a temporary location will allow council, city administration, community partners, and the public time to set priorities and assign roles during these fiscal prudent times that will match the community's identity and interests as it relates to the planning for the construction of a new LCSE facility over the next 10 years when funding and financing is in place to support the project. A couple options for council that you pass the recommendations that are being brought forward, which are to negotiate a lease rate for 10 years, to decommission the current LCSE facility once the new location has been completed, and that we look for planning of a new facility construction on the existing site, or that council requests additional information, and that would be brought forward to a regular council meeting in the near future. Alignment with the strategic plan, sustainable fiscal strategy, as the LCSE facility has reached its end of useful serviceable lifespan. This will allow the city to maintain current and future service levels to residents and visitors in a fiscally responsible manner while planning for a future facility. On page 3, you will find a breakdown of the budget. So, government's implications, the Lloydminster Museum Collections Management Policy 761-01 will be adhered to during the decommissioning of the LCSE facility. From an operating perspective, the administration is anticipating an increase to our operating budget around $107,000. I believe that number will be lower based on the number we use to calculate the lease rate.
2020 capital budget would include renovation costs, which were provided by a local contractor with 50% contingency, so $1 million for fit up of that space. The SAS Tourism building setup for $12,000, moving costs at $10,000, and construction of the City of Lloydminster artifact display at $300,000, and potential signage for $30,000. Total anticipated 2020 capital budget implications of $1,372,280, and we're potentially looking to have a funding source from our capital reserve, general government of $1.4 million to pay for that. Future costs will include moving OTS displays to Lakeland College, as we discussed at the Governance Priority Committee on February 18th. Potential purchase of a truck, as large items and things will need to be transported back and forth between our storage facility and this new location. And then the demolition of the current LCSC building for a total of $447,500 to be allocated to future capital budgets. Summary of capital fiscal implications in 2020, $1.372, $280. Future implications of $447,500 for a total implication of $1,819,780. I will pass it back to you, Your Worship, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Executive Manager Stein. Questions, comments? Councilor McNabb.
Thank you, Worship. This is a much bigger deal than, say, putting the Heritage Building up for sale. There are a lot of community groups, user groups, a ton of artifacts and things that are probably going to deteriorate in a 10-year period sitting in a sea can somewhere. I don't dispute the findings of the report. It's lengthy and very detailed for all the things I spent the weekend going through. What I am a little concerned about is the stakeholder engagement pieces that can come along with a decision of this kind of magnitude. Has there been enough time allocated for the public to actually consume this information? Think about it. Provide feedback to administration and council before a decision like this can be made. How many consultations were had? How many consultations should we continue to have before we actually put pen to paper on this and say this is the direction we're going to get? A month from now, 2 weeks from now, we may end up going down the same road. However, I've heard from numerous people in the community that perhaps a little more time to discuss this with other stakeholders should potentially be considered. And I can't argue with that. I think that this is a staple of our community. Our arts and cultural piece of our community is significant and appreciated by the many, many volunteers and staff that actually make this building run, and those that have put into it in the past. I think it would be good if we considered that just a little bit longer, because I don't think a month or 2 weeks or whatever the case may be, if a decision is made on this in the next today, what's 2 more weeks to have people hear it out, get out more in the public, use our communications avenues to do so. I'm sure that we'll be asked by the media to be interviewed about this after the fact, and they're going to do their part in making sure that all of this information is clearly out there in the public, so nobody can come back and say that they didn't know this was the implication that this decision was going to cause.
Thank you, Councilor. Yeah, Councilor Bajak.
So, quick question. We've obviously talked to, and correct me if I'm Executive Director Stein. So we've talked to our Heritage Society, our Richard Larson Association, our advisory committee. We've also talked to the folks that are the archives. Have we not?
Yes.
So I'm not sure which other group would be significant in here. And my concern, I guess, is that the building continues to deteriorate, and I'm not sure what what that period of time for particular people who are not using and directly impacted with this. I don't disagree with that another week or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but I'm not sure who else we'd really want to be consulting with. But those primary uses are in there, and we have a plan to support them going forward, I guess. So who would those people be?
Councilor, okay, I'll let you address that. Go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. It's one thing to consult with the user groups, which we've been doing. But what I find is that a decision like this hasn't been fully digested by the community at large. And what I don't want is to have somebody come back and say, I didn't know. If we give them every opportunity now, got published last week as a council agenda item, it came today, we talked about it a few different times at different meetings, as noted here by Director Stang. But when a decision of this magnitude, in my opinion, is being discussed, we didn't have an open house for community engagement or anything like that around it necessarily, for enough people to come to.
I thought there was
There
some
was some.
selections and stuff around that. I
There
guess.
was some.
Yeah.
But I would just like to let this sit for a few more weeks so that nobody can come back and say, I didn't know about this.
And Councillor, I hope I can add a little clarity to this. We had the opportunity late last week to speak to myself and members of the administration, spoke to user groups that we're talking about here today. But those folks got that outlined so that there was a clarity of information. That was the intention, to have those groups come, because it came to GPC last Tuesday. Ideally, it would have happened Wednesday, but just due to time, we had the opportunity to make sure that they understood the information that had been presented to council. That was the key factor. Now, that was a couple representatives from some groups that didn't entail the entire group. So I can see where the challenge could be sought out from the perspective that it's been talked about, but the real plan is finally came together as of last Tuesday, the first time in open council from that perspective, presented by administration through the GPC. And I don't know if those folks have had a chance as a group to dissect it, because we had basically 4 representatives from 4 different groups there to ask questions and hear the comments explained, as the executive manager Stang, the city manager, and myself went through what is being proposed. That's really what was the information, the same information we heard at the GPC that we are hearing today. And then you've had 4 people here, so I can understand where Councillor Buckingham's coming from that perspective. That question. I just wanted to provide a little clarity, because I led that meeting last week, and I want to make sure that it was not a meeting in secret. It wasn't a public meeting, but we felt it was important to ensure that those user groups that we dealt with, and I've sat with those user groups and through consultants and sitting with administration, making sure that information got to the people that it needed to get to. But maybe there hasn't been enough time to disseminate, is what I'm hearing. I think Councilor Monroe and then Councilor Forrest.
A couple questions, I guess, in terms of user groups. Did we contact the school divisions? Because would we say that over 80% of the users that go through that building are our schools?
Yeah, you're correct. There is a large amount of group that.
Okay. So I guess just to finish that, is that when we consult with our civic center, or we consult with our BioClean Aquatic Center, we are consulting with the individuals that actually frequent those places. We're consulting with user groups in terms of people that are paying an admission fee, our taxpayers that are paying the money to go and use that facility. So to me, I appreciate the time and the effort that Archives does for their organization. I appreciate the Richard Larson people. I appreciate everybody, and they are user groups, yes, but they aren't the people that are also going there on a daily basis. They are providing, in a way, a service also to the community through the Cultural and Science Center for the residents of our community to be able to go there and see history, to see arts and culture. So to me, I guess I would want to know that our main user groups, which would be the school divisions, have also been considered in just talking to them and seeing. I mean, maybe it makes no difference for them where they're going, if they're taking the bus of students to the current location or if they're taking the bus of students to a future location. However, just to at least have that conversation with them, as they would be the prime user group, users of the facilities. One other thing is just, if we waited 2 weeks or a month, and I mean, I know how much administration has on their plate. I understand that, to add communications and having another engagement and adding this, I understand at the end of the day, it just asking more of administration, and at some point there will be limitations on what we can ask of you. However, what would 2 to 4 weeks look like in the grand scheme of things for this, even if it just comes back the exact same as it is now? What does it look like in the grand scheme of things, in the plan, conversations with the lease, continued building deterioration? I mean, we do need to pull the trigger on some things, I understand that, and in a timely manner. I question, I don't see this often, but echo, I do agree with some of Councilor Buckingham's comments, that is it too quick turnaround? I don't know without having a little bit more of engagement to provide that feedback.
Administration.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's council's desire, we can do public engagement. We'll just have to talk about what feedback we're looking for from the public. I'm not sure what you're going to be looking for what are we going to ask the public? What are we looking for feedback?
So I guess for me, I agree with everything that's in here. I think that it's a good plan personally. However, I want to hear that from the residents of our community, because that's why I'm around this table, is making decisions in the best interest of our community. And I don't think that we've talked a lot in camera, but as far as actual knowledge for the public, I haven't had the opportunity to go out there and actually get the opinions of people to provide me with this particular plan, right? So just to get their opinion on what they think, I guess. But my other question is that what does happen? If we do wait that 2-4 weeks, whatever that looks like, is it, a lot of this stuff is immediate. It says right in here, we need to do this now. We need to do this yesterday. So by delaying it another month, what are the repercussions of that?
Maybe to reframe it, the option is before us.
Right.
I'm not sure what the alternative solution is to moving forward. There are a number which we've discussed with council in different environments. Delaying it for a month doesn't really have major impact unless we lose mechanical, we have a major issue at that facility. It's just delaying moving date for the new facility a month down the road, because once council provides direction, we'll have to obviously negotiate a lease rate for the new facility. We would have to put out documentation to secure construction. We have to get the construction done, which is in a 6 to 8 month process. And we'd have to plan for moving, building out our displays, fitting the new space up. So it doesn't have any real, I can't say if we don't move today, this is going to happen. It just delays everything down the road. If that's council's wish, administration will definitely do whatever council's directions.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. Councilor Dorsey? Are you good?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing around the table, I don't know if everyone was there or not, but we absolutely, after, the report on the buildings, I believe went to GPC first, prior to going to council. And in both cases, it suggested that that building was at end of life. And then we did public consultation with the public on that building at that time. And now we've had a proposal of, okay, we let you guys know this thing it's in rough shape. It cannot continue business as usual. So now we have a proposal of, this is what we're going to do about it. I understand, and now that we've actually talked to specific user groups, but the public at large was already aware that this building needs to be shut down, one way or another. So that's why I don't necessarily agree that we need to punt the ball a month down the road, because you have one of two options. Your options are go with something like this, regardless of what the building is, where the lease space is, or you could theoretically buy something in the short term, but I don't think that makes any sense either. Then your other option is just shut it down and close altogether, because it's A or B. So either way, I don't see what another 3 or 4 weeks of consultation is going to tell you. It's either going to be shut it down right now immediately and we'll start fundraising for X number of years to build a new building, or it's shut it down right now, let's put it into a temporary location, which I understand is going to increase costs in the short term and does extend the period in which it takes to save up the money to build that new one and to get the grant funding and everything else to get the new one. but at least you still have a product to offer the public in that time. And we're hoping that with the changes that we're making is going to be an improved product to what's currently out there right now. So to me, I understand the perspective. I think that, in my opinion, I think we've done enough to be able to make a decision like this. And I think maybe that's just where we will disagree.
Okay, Councilor Baker, and Councilor Dodger, and Councilor.
Okay, thank you. Well, your worship, as you well know, that I've been around the campfire on this one with senior administration and had some real concerns from day one. But I must say that over the last week or so, I've got a lot of good information that I didn't really have. If I had it, I didn't know about it. And from a building's perspective, I'm talking about the existing science building, or whatever we call it, the main building. What do we call it again? Got a name on it. Okay, the one we're talking about. There's a lot more that meets the eye. When you dig into the total report, and if it's only half right, it means a lot of work. And what happened to that building? It's about 25 to 30 years old. It was built on the low end side. It wasn't built like this city hall is built out of steel and concrete. It was a wood frame building with, unfortunately, a flat roof. And the water's got into it. There's mechanical deterioration. And city councils of the past, probably, and administration, didn't do enough to maintain that building. Right or wrong, that's the status of that building. And regardless of what you do, I don't think you can use that building much longer for its intended purpose. And I'm talking about humidification and all the things required to run. I'm never sure what's the difference between the science center and a museum. Quite frankly, I'm going to get into trouble. I wish they still called it the Bar Colony Museum, so I know what I'm talking about. But in a way, I'm not a Bar Colony, but I'm close to it. Whatever you do, first of all, I agree with my learned friend here. I don't think the general public, we take for granted they know. We take for granted they know. I could do a telephone survey tonight to probably 40 of my buddies if I got any of them left. And they'd say, what are you talking about? Because most people don't follow this stuff like you and I do, because we're committed every week to this. And every day, and we're passionate about it. But where people just say, where's the new rink? And I want this in it, I want that in it. What we gotta do is, we gotta find a new place for all the things you're talking about. For classes, training, museum, whatever is gonna go in that building. We have to make sure that we know what we're doing with OTS. We had a 10-year deal with them. That's history. It's not wore out, it's history. And to me, museums mean history. And we should make sure those things are all going to be included somewhere in the scheme of things. There's some things that are wore out and have to go. Like the wildlife, for example. Some of those birds have many feathers left on them. So you can't fix that stuff. I'm being serious. So sometimes when a project goes dead, it's dead. So as much as I argued with the administration, I admit it publicly, I don't bother me. I didn't think this was the right move to lease space somewhere else. But after the last meeting and all the dialogue we had, it doesn't really matter what building it is, as long as the public has clear, smooth access to it, it's safe for the staff, and it's clean, and we can do what we want to do in there, is basically relying the museum side of our operation there on an interim basis. The old building, some stuff will have to be parked. Some might have to go to Lakeland College, some might have to be bundled up for a year or a while, I don't know what it is. But the reality is if we say we want to live in that building, I don't think we can and meet the codes and do all the other things we have to do. So what's the alternate? And my slack on it is, I think this is hard for me to do. Administration was right, but we had to deal with it, and the report is right. I know you'd like that. The report, write it down with your daughter. I'm not saying there isn't other alternates. No, seriously.
No, I do appreciate
I'm not taking this lightly at all. Seriously. But to go 2 more weeks to make sure the public really understands what we're doing. Have a blitz, whatever that might be, to our information people, and make really sure the users know. I know for a fact there's many residents and seniors that have donated big time to the museum over the last 40 years. And those are the people we got to respect. It was their money, and they did it. They didn't necessarily say, we're donating this money so we keep this for 100 years, but out of due respect for those people that volunteered their time and donated their money and made it happen, 2 more weeks won't kill the project. But there's nothing to say that this could be all ready to go, and this doesn't say we're going to change it. Because if we say, no, we don't want to do that, then what are we going to do? Are we going to sit here and do this all over again? So, regardless of what we do today, it's so critical we take an extra couple of weeks and have a real information. It doesn't matter how good we've done it. Do another information session or do whatever your worship, so that people are satisfied and the council members are satisfied that everybody had an equal opportunity to express their opinion about this project. I never thought I'd ever be talking like this, but that's the fact. And I thank Dion and the boys and Don for hanging in there and getting their point through on this whole project, because it's a big project. And 10 years from now, when we build a new, or 8 years, depending on our funding, that was very good to get some money today. That helps. If we can build a new museum or whatever, we'll be just that further ahead. But that building isn't going to last very much longer. And spending, I think it was $3 million you had earmarked for that building, if you had to renovate it.
Yeah, $3 million for the renovation.
You know, that would be just a waste of money. So, thank you, Your Worship, and I hope that you'll consider a little extra time for people to find out for sure what's going on.
Thank you, Council Baker. Words were very much appreciated. I'm going to get Council Thorson and Council Bashak, but Council Baker hasn't had a chance to speak, so I can let everyone have an opportunity to come around.
Yeah, I would echo much of Councillor Baker's comments there. I think we're all pretty much in agreement that that building is very problematic, and something needs to be done. But I think that not everybody has had that opportunity to come and give their 2 cents. I know a number of people that I've spoken to would like to have some input on it, and it might be just a very small percentage of our community, but it means a lot to them. And I think that just by a couple of weeks to get their buy-in will save us much grief in the future.
Council Buckingham, sorry, Thorson, I'll take it now. Thank you. And then I think I also got you on the slate. Yeah.
So, what I'm hearing though, I think all those things can still happen. You could still get buy-in from the public. I would like to be able to give administration the ability to negotiate the lease. We could still give administration the ability to negotiate the lease, and we don't have to do and approve the decommissioning today. You can still just negotiate the lease, then we can firm up those prices, and that lease presumably would have to come back to council either way. So in the meantime, we don't have to slow down. I think we still need the ability to negotiate the lease and firm up those prices, and that would actually make your decision-making even easier, especially if we find out that any installation of an HVAC system by the city may reduce lease rates by X. So I think it's actually still a good thing to follow through on what we're doing right now and continue on with even the first recommendation. We don't necessarily have to do the second, and we don't necessarily have to do the third at this meeting. But the first one I think is still really important that we follow through, and that doesn't stop us from doing some kind of feedback gathering mission from the public. Yeah.
Good, I understand.
Yeah, Your Worship, that's a very good point, Councillor. One thing I was going to say, if we do delay it for 2 weeks and we do public engagement, we wouldn't be talking about a specific facility because we haven't had the authority to enter into a lease agreement or negotiate those leases. So there are a couple locations the city is working with different owners on, but we don't have a specified site yet until we have the ability to negotiate that. So very good point, Council.
Okay, we're around, Councilor Diachet.
All right. Yeah, so a couple things. I think we're mixing two messages up here. And I think one of the messages that I hear is that we haven't talked enough to people to let them know where we're going, or what we're going to do, so they don't really understand why we're doing what we're doing. And the bottom line is that if you go to the primary user, which are the schools, and you ask the students what their impression of the museum is, probably one of the top 3 comments you're going to hear, it stinks in there. And if anybody's been in there, that's what they're going to tell you. And that reflects the condition of that part of the building. It needs to be done with, it needs to be moved off. And as you heard Councillor Baker, this has been around a while. So if you consult and 10 people say, oh no, hang on to it, does that change the quality or the state of that building? Not one iota. Not one lick. It's still the condition that it is. So I guess I would caution us as we're going to get this feedback, because I'm not sure what feedback we're getting. Do people to say no, spend $3 million on this thing and put lipstick on a pig and think that it's something else? That's not going to be what you're going to achieve in that process. I think more than anything, people need to understand that this process is really about moving the museum, moving the displays, culling some of the displays, pardon me, that no longer have any value. And we probably lack message in communicating about the fact that's where we're going and what we plan on doing. So you're still going to sustain all these pieces that are there. So you still will have a museum in the interim in a different location. You still will have all these pieces with a longer range plan. So let's keep in mind that, the building is one small part. It's the future plan that people need to hear. We have a plan, you're going to have it, and what we're trying to do is mitigate the cost, because quite frankly, spending money in that place now is a waste of our money and a waste of our time. So if we've lacked in communication, I think that's probably it. So my fear in this process is that we get caught up in this loop of saying, no, don't move it, we like it there, then what are you going to do? And in my mind, I think that's a mistake to ask that question. So if we're looking for feedback and engagement, it should be more around moving forward. What do you think of us going to another place and housing this in a longer term plan? And because if we ask the other question, then you better be prepared to accept the answer. And if they say no and stay, then what are you going to do?
Okay, Councilor Buckingham, Councilor Monroe, and that Councilor Buckingham.
Go ahead if you guys want.
You want to finish it off? Okay.
Yeah,
Councilor Monroe.
I guess my point really doesn't change. I understand. I said I'm pleased with the proposal today. My fact is that I sit around this table and I am the voice of our community. And when I hear from residents that they want more input, then that's what I'm taking forward with my decision today, is not because I don't respect and appreciate the town administration and agree wholeheartedly with what this plan says and what the study shows me. I know that there's people around this table who don't want 3 readings in one meeting because they don't want things to move too quickly. Well, what I'm hearing from residents is they want more input. Whether that input is something that we take or not really is irrelevant. It's the fact that it is their money that's going to be sustaining this place. And if they're asking me that we need more time, whether that's 2 or 4 weeks, that's why I'm making my decision today. I just want to reiterate that, is that I've had phone calls, I've had people talking to me about it, and for those residents, it is an issue that we are making this decision with such a quick turnaround. Yes, the public engagement has been out there. We have had our building report, and we have had the ability, but wasn't laid out like this, saying this is what we're doing, this is where we're moving, this is what we're doing, and today is the decision that we're making it. So for me, and I appreciate what Dave said, is that it's just too quick for them. I think if it's not, 2 weeks is not going to make or break the deal, then we can wait 2 or 4 weeks to respect the voice of our community.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, both my learned friends here are right. But when the people say, I want input, you got to interpret what they mean. Input, 95% of the time is, what are you guys doing? It's not input. I want a fire hydrant in front of the building. That's input. You don't get much. I want to see a room for bingo. if that's what you want. That's the only question you get. You don't say, we want to see a building this big, they built this way with these kind of features. You very get a little bit. And I've been around a while. What input means when people say, I want input, in my mind, I interpret. I don't know what's going on. Tell me how you're going to do this. And you both did it quite well. We're going to take the old building, we're going to use it till we can get this other one renovated. We're going to move the stuff from here to here, whatever we can. We're going to use that until we have a new building on this thing. How many people really know that? I know the people that don't know that as late as last Thursday, and people that I thought might be learned in the community. So we gotta do exactly what you said. We can't say, well, we won't tear that building down. Because that would be crazy, because it's what it is. I told you I've been beating on that one. So the horse is dead. So I think that everything that's happening, whether it makes total economic sense, you'll never know. But you gotta take what you can get, when you can get it, where you can get it, to serve the public the best. And that location for the new museum on an interim basis is right on the highway. It's good for tourists. It's attached to the mall or not close to it, you know, along that strip. Easy to get to, probably a lot safer place to go at times. I don't know, but that won't change. But whatever message we carry out there, it's about what we're going to do and what we're recommending to do, rather than what do you think we should do. That's the kind of language I get back for many years, Your Worship. So please take that and think about it.
Well, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had 259 written down as the time councillor commended administration, just for the record. 259. This has been a lot of information that wants to come forward, and that's the basis of my ask. I don't suspect for a minute that we're going to get a ton of people saying, no, don't do that. I don't expect that at all. But as Councillor Baker said, Councillor Diachek, everyone, Jonathan, everybody said it, people just want to see what's happening. I don't think anybody can fight the direction this is going. That's a non-issue, non-starter for me. And I don't think it's going to be a starter for anybody. It's pretty clear what has to happen. But giving everybody the opportunity to see what has to happen is the basis for why I brought it up. So it's just a lot at once. So it's not going to hurt us.
So we're going to wait 2 weeks for people to say that, but tell them we're going to do this anyways. That's kind of
I think that
the double talk for me, right?
I think I think that let's put a little clarity, because we covered the basis very well. And I guess I've sort of been taking all this in. I hope I can summarize it into what I've heard from everybody around this table, is that we want to move forward. We know that the Lloyd Cultural and Science Center is not sustainable as it is today. There's bar none. I think everyone around this table agrees. I think we agree that we need to find a new home. After that, I think that's where the question is the dissemination of the information to the community. And I think that's the question that needs to be drilled down to right now, is, as Councilor Baker said it very well, taking the message to the community. In essence, we're not going to have a question and answer session per se why we're doing it. We can support that, I guess, if that question comes up. But I think this is the steps we're proposing moving forward. And this is how it's going to happen. And it's going to address those people that donated family heirlooms that are near and dear to some people's hearts. People have put hours and hours and hours into that facility. And it's not that we're going to, that's not going away from the perspective. It's a building, folks. And I think that's the important piece that we need to help. How are we going to move it and get that communication through to the community? That, I think, is key. And I've heard a little bit of that as well. I've heard from councillors that the discussions are in the public. So I think Councillor Thorson hit it right by giving the administration the ability to move forward today in one resolution, if that's what we so decide. We'll move this forward. We're not taking the yardstick and running to the end of the road, but we're moving it forward to start. Finalize the numbers. Now, I guess, and I will say, I would suggest we have an information session, not an actual opportunity just to carry this information. So if anyone is interested, wondering where this is at, it's an opportunity to ask questions and get some answers. because we have a pretty good direction here. Council hasn't set that direction yet. But the information administration has provided is very crystal clear, in essence, of the steps that have to go through. I understand that some of the community feel that it may have happened sooner than they'd like, and they didn't get that information, but I guess we're talking about heritage here and that personal feeling. So I hope, my recommendation, or the way I would like to say I would express myself as a voter on this table is Councillor Torstenson's first resolution. We can move that forward. We can get administration starting the process. At the same time, we can look to administration or ask them to propose an open house to fit a calendar where hopefully most of the council can be available, and certainly I'm prepared, and we have some administration available in the next 2 weeks to let people come to, and if we want to have it at the Cultural Science Center, what a great place, so that they might say, why aren't we moving out of here sooner? Or wherever that may be, to give them that opportunity if they have questions, because we have the communication team, the media's here, they can carry that message forward, and we can put that together in a very short time, I hope, to do that. And then council, in 2 weeks, if that's amenable to council, at this point, to give direction to administration, bring back the remainder, and we can clearly sit at this table and say, we've heard from people, we want to move this forward, we want you to get cracking, we've already given them the first direction, but it just finalizes the process. And again, we're dealing with something that we haven't dealt with as a council. We're dealing with history, and we're dealing with a lot of history, a lot of people's history. That's really what it comes down to. And the evolution, and I'll go back to my Friday meeting. That was quite a discussion, and you said it, Councilor Baker, very well. What is that place called? And, I think that's one that this council, or I suspect councils in the future will have to deal with, because there was a museum. There's an oil field interpretive center, and there was also a culture and science center. And we kind of lost that, but I don't want to make that the discussion today, but I think that's the kind of input we need from people to take it moving as we start to move forward. So that's my suggestion to council. I'm not in a position to make a resolution, but I will certainly take any more comments. If not, I will certainly entertain a resolution to get this moving. Councilor Torsten.
I'll make that resolution. I move that council direct administration to negotiate lease rates on a 10-year term for a facility that will provide space for the temporary relocation of the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center.
I'll look for a second. Councilor Fagin, thank you. Any further discussion on the resolution proposed? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, now this is, we need a further resolution, City Clerk, to, if we don't move the other 2 resolutions forward, if that's the will of council.
If council makes no resolutions, nothing goes forward, but if council would like to direct administration over an open house, they can do so through a motion as well.
Okay, that will clarify. Thank you. Now, with that in mind, I'll look to council for direction on the next resolution they'd like to bring forward.
If I may.
Oh, certainly. I'll let the city clerk have a moment first, please.
That council direct administration holds an information session to provide members of the public with information on the future Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center with findings to come back to a future council meeting.
Okay, is that clear enough, or do you want to take?
I'll make that motion. Do we have to have a motion?
Yeah, we're looking for a motion. So, Councilor Baker, motion.
Yeah.
Councilor Monroe, seconded. Is there any discussion to that motion?
Yeah.
Certainly. Councilor Torsten.
Likely going to vote in favor of this, but just as a general rule, we are elected to make decisions on behalf of the public, and I feel that we've had enough trial balloons with this item that I personally am prepared to go all the way with it. But at the end of the day, we're not elected to make sure that everyone knows everything that's going on. We push the information out, and if people don't get it, we do our best to ensure that everyone gets it. And we're talking about 5 months ago, or 4 months ago, that we first put some of this stuff out there as far as end of life of the building. So I feel as though we've done our due diligence. But we are, at the end of the day, elected to make sure that we know what we're doing, that we make sure we take all the steps that need to be taken with things like this building, and make sure we put the information out to the public. I'm fine with doing another information session and not going through with the other ones, but at the end of the day, I was ready to, because I feel we've done enough.
Councilor Buckingham.
Trust me, we don't always know what we're doing.
Thank you, Worship. At the end of the day, we've had a lot of big ticket items, a lot of big changes that have happened with this group over the last 3 years. And I can count on maybe 2 or 3 fingers, not even a whole hand, how many times I received multiple pieces of feedback from multiple different individuals about something, and this is one of them. So when I hear those things, it's like, hey, pump the brakes a little bit here and take this step. I haven't heard it a lot, I really haven't. In 3 years, there's been very few, but this was multiple, and that's a flag for me. That's why I sit here, right? When I hear that those flags go up and I get that information coming back, this is when you do that. And that's why I brought it up, because it wasn't one person that I talked to, it was multiple.
And that is what the motion is to deal with, I believe.
Add one comment if I can.
Certainly.
Okay, yeah, I understand. I think, because I've had people approach me not just on this issue, but other issues, and I've always felt it was my responsibility to enlighten them and share where we're at, and that was my goal, to provide that information. So I guess, you know, if 10 people asked me about a question, I gave 10 people the information. And if they said they still didn't understand, then that was the issue for me. Because obviously it meant that I wasn't presenting the information in a clear way, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, back to Councillor Torson's point. But if in those 10 people I was able to provide the information council was doing, they nodded their head and said, yeah, it makes sense, then that meant we're on the right track. So I'm just careful what we're doing here, because I'm not sure the kind of messaging that we need to wrap around this session we're going to host. Because if we're saying, yeah, we're committed to knocking it down, but we just want to get your input on it or whatever it is, that's contrary to, I would be ticked off if I was invited in as a community member to say the decision's going to be made, but here's your chance to give input. So if we're going to make the decision anyways, make the decision and say, here's the plan, get on with it. That's our job.
Councillor? Councillor McNeil?
No, thank you, Your Worship. And for me, that's where it's at. That's exactly where it's at. Here's the plan that City Council is pushing forward. We have a resolution that we're going to be negotiating lease space. This says to me we're not going back. Right? So there's just so much to take in off the bat. But it's just a way to get people to fully understand that direction that we're taking, because I really don't think that anybody's going to come back and say, don't do this. But it gives them the opportunity to have the discussion and look through it and say, yep, perfect, done. They've had the chance. That's all I'm asking for.
I've heard it. Any other comments before I call for the question? Oh, sorry, Executive Manager Stan.
Yeah, just one recommendation from communications team is that it's a community engagement, not an open house. It gives us more flexibility to get input and feedback. So just verbiage for the resolution.
So we need to amend the motion, City Clerk, or we?
I'll make that amendment.
You'll make that amendment, good. And it'll be seconded by Councillor Fagman, and we will agree a motion. Oh, actually, Councillor Baker made the motion, so friendly amendment?
I'm easy.
Friendly amendment, I acknowledge, as in yes, okay, and the seconder was Councilor Monroe, agreed, okay. So friendly amendment noted. Are we ready for the question? Good, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Great discussion, Council. I think that the community is, we've done the community right. Moving on to 7.4, operations, back to the City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 7.4.1, Alberta Essential East Water Supply Allocation of Funds. I'll ask Terry Burke to come forward.
No doubt.
Good afternoon.
Mayor and Council. Sorry, I heard my name was not. So the recommendation is that Council approve the allocation of funds from the offsite levy water reserve for expenses associated to the water main upsizing and T connection to the airport in the amount of $160,287. So the issue in June of 2017, Council supported a motion to approve the funding to upsize the water main and provide a future connection point for water main to the airport. The project is now complete, and the funds will be needed to allocate it for the expenses incurred. During the governance meeting there last week, we brought forward information on the actual upsizing of the main and, of course, the T location and all that kind of stuff like that. Back in 2017, Council approved the actual water supply agreement, and then through the detailed design, they've obviously established a size of water main at a certain size. We looked at it, and requested it to be upsized to accommodate future growth in the area. And also that T. So alignment with the strategic plan is the open responsive government, in particular the sustainable infrastructure. And as noted in the recommendation, the funds are to be allocated from the offsite living reserve water reserve itself. So I'll pass your worship for any questions.
Thank you, Terry. Questions or comments for Terry? I guess, Terry, just to rehash, I hate doing this, but in the GPC, and again, maybe somebody didn't capture that. All we're basically paying for is the increased lines capacity that we pay, and that would have been 350 millimeters, I believe, to 400 or whatever that magic number was. We put in a T in the ground to serve potential development in the airport area, and there was an open hole. We took advantage of a huge cost saving. We're really just paying for the material that went in for our benefit.
Yeah, that's correct, your worship. It's just where the actual difference between that two sides of the water main. The trenching and everything else was included as part of the base agreement in their cost. The T, of course, to dig it up, that location, install the T, valves, whatever else, that's that specific cost as well.
A good deal that way.
Yeah, it definitely, again, having, take these opportunities and build upon it. Of course, that way negates us having to put another water main in to service the growth and everything else. So now we can share that main.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, you make a motion, Councilor Buckingham?
You bet, thanks, Your Worship. Move the council approve the allocation of funds from the offsite levy water reserve for expenses associated to the water main upsizing and T connection to the airport in the amount of $160,287.
Second, Councilor Thorson. Any further discussion before I call for the final question? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Terry. Could I look to council for a 5-minute recess, motion to recess?
Make that motion, Your worship, for a
Second.
Yes, recess.
Councilor Franklin, all in favor? 5-minute recess, carried. Thank you very much.
Why didn't we do a 1-hour recess at the start?
Because you had the right person here for recess. The City of Westminster Council meeting of Monday, February 24th, 2020, back to order. This time we will return to the agenda of 7.5 bylaws. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 7.5.1 bylaw number 5, 2020, GNC Francophone Education Region number 2, property tax exemption. Scott Rivera.
Good afternoon again, Your Worship, Council.
Good afternoon, next slide.
Our recommendation is that Council grant first reading to bylaw number 05-2020, the GNC Francophone Education Region number 2, property tax exemption bylaw. Administration is looking for approval of a new bylaw to grant property tax exemption to the Greater North Central Francophone Education Region number 2 in Lloydminster. Administration was first contacted by the GNC Francophone Education Region number 2, stating that they were exempt from property taxes as they are a school division established under the Act of Alberta. However, due to the wording in the Lloydminster Charter, the school division is required to own and occupy the property in order to qualify for exemption. In the rest of Alberta, the legislation states that the school division can own or occupy the property and would be exempt from property taxes. As the GNC Francophone Education Region does not own the property, they are not automatically exempt as they would be anywhere else in Alberta. Administration encouraged the organization to submit an application for property tax exemption under Community Organization Property Tax Exemption Regulation, or COPTR. However, their application revealed that they would not qualify under COPTR due to the restrictive nature of the school. Students are required to be of Francophone descent to enroll. However, they do not meet the COPTR requirements of the property not being restricted for more than 30% of the time. Administration obtained legal advice on alternate opinions from the Francophone options for Francophone school to obtain property tax exemption. The only section of the Lloydminster Charter that would permit exemption is Section 295 and 313. Section 295 is very general and allows council to cancel, reduce, or defer property taxes. This section has not been used in the past, as it could set precedents for its use. Section 313 is specific to nonprofit organization and allows for the establishment of a bylaw exempting from taxation property held by a nonprofit organization, as defined in Section 183F of the Lloydminster Charter. Section 183F includes in the definition of nonprofit organizations any other entity established under the law of Canada, Alberta, or Saskatchewan for a purpose other than to make a profit. The GNC Francophone Education Region number 2 meets this definition as it is established as an education region under the ministerial order of the Government of Alberta. Section 313 does not require the school division to own the property, but allows it for it to be held by the nonprofit organization. This bylaw was first brought to council for first reading on February 10, 2020, regular council meeting. Council requested further information regarding provincial funding that education regions receive to offset costs of leasing properties. Administration affirmed that the GNC Francophone Education Region number 2 is responsible for property taxes as per Section 3.1 of their lease, which states leasing agrees that it shall pay all municipal property taxes assessed against or attributable to the demised premises throughout the term. Administration also confirmed that the GNC Francophone Education Region number 2 only receives funding from the Alberta Education Capital Plan in the amount equivalent to the annual rent less property taxes. Administration has spoken with multiple contacts in Alberta Education and confirmed that the provincial regulations were amended in 2015 so that the education region leasing properties are now exempt from property taxes under Section 362 of the Municipal Government Act in Alberta. So option 1 is the council grant first reading to bylaw number 05-2020, Greater North Central Francophone Education Region number 2, property tax exemption bylaw. Or number 2, the council not grant first reading to bylaw number 05-2020, or option 3, the council requests additional information. Budget implications is approval of this bylaw would result in updating the assessment code of approximately $17,000 less in property taxes per year that are currently paid by the GNC Francophone Education Region. This amount will be adjusted for in the mill rate. Pass back to you, Your Worship, for questions or comments.
Thank you, Scott. Councilman Rowe.
So just a couple of questions and comments. So if I'm looking at this as an organization that is not an educational organization, take that completely out of the picture, because to me it's not, from my view of it, it's not a public educational establishment. However, it is a nonprofit organization, is that correct?
That's, yeah, for sure.
So if it is a nonprofit organization, clearly under Section 313, it states that they do have the ability to apply for a tax exemption, being that they're a nonprofit organization, is that correct?
They would apply under COPTR as a non-profit organization. They qualify in the definition of a nonprofit, but typically they will be handled as a school, other than the fact that our charter has that one word in there that differs from the MGA.
Okay, so but legally within Canada, are they a nonprofit organization?
They will meet the qualifications of the definition, yes.
Okay, so if they meet those qualifications, I'm looking at it then not as a school, but under section 313, which says that they should be tax exempt because of the nonprofit organization. Is that correct? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, when I look at this, there's, to me, a lot of confusion, and part of it, and this isn't anyone's fault by any means, because I know when we talk about the COPTR issue, we were trying to find other avenues to help out the Francophone school based on the fact that within our charter it didn't meet the standard for property tax exemption. But to me, the entire COPTR thing is a red herring. This is a school, it's established by law as a school within the province of Alberta, which is the provincial jurisdiction that establishes that this is a public school. There's no question, it's a public school, regardless of not-for-profit staff or standard. That shouldn't even be part of the conversation. We only are looking at that because the way our law or our charter is worded is slightly different than the way the MGA is. This is an issue that doesn't apply to any other jurisdiction within the province of Alberta where this is legally a school. And it's only in our jurisdiction where, because of wording and a simple and or, that it's somehow they need to pay $17,000 than they otherwise would in any other jurisdiction. To me, as a community that always tries to make things as seamless and ideal for our different user groups and things like that, why would we try and turn that on its head and actually just make things worse for someone within the city? Like, that doesn't make any sense. We try and get PST exemptions. We try and make everything as seamless as possible. But now we're saying, no, you can't have one of these other public schools in our community because, or you have to pay taxes whereas every other one doesn't, and change the standard on them. I don't think it's their fault that our charter is worded with an and rather than an or whatever the case is. At the end of the day, they're trying to provide education to, I accept, a particular group, but at the same time, it's still established by law as a provincial school, and we have the duty to provide the property tax exemption. It may be a not-for-profit in form, but the COPTR rule shouldn't apply. We only had to go through that step because of the fact that our charter was worded in a certain way. So it's a red herring. The entire not-for-profit issue is a red herring. It makes no difference to this argument as to whether or not it's a not-for-profit because it's a school. So at the end of the day, I think we've spent, in my eyes, enough time on this one that, you know, if we want to say no, they can't do it, then we'll be looking forward to the legal challenges and the charter challenge, because we've heard enough about how it's a right within the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and we're looking at a charter challenge if we say no. So make your choice. It's either allow the property tax exemption for the $17,000 or whatever the number is, or pay more than that in legal fees to try and fight it because we don't want to just do what we would otherwise do for any other school. That's all.
Councilor Dutchak.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think the change from 2010 to 2015 in the Education Act, or the capital plan within the Act is really what sort of was the big piece. And in 2010 it said triple net, which included the release of tax and whatever money was set aside to do renovations and whatnot. And in 2015 that changed to create a pool of funds that any school that was conducting school business and property that was not owned by them, but rather leased by them, a pool of funds was created, and they would only pay a portion of the cost. And then the expectation was the municipalities would then absorb that cost. This is an example where the province has simply downloaded it onto the municipalities, and there's really not much you can do about it. And I agree, it's a no-brainer. Just pass this and move on.
I would just say that despite however you're coming to that decision, really is whether it's my choice being the motion is that I'm taking it as a nonprofit organization because I feel that at 27 students, to whether the government of Alberta classifies it as not as a school, and whether at the end of the day we run by our charter, and whether we could be challenging our charter in so many different ways at so many different times. So what I classify as a public school and what for whatever other reasons, if I'm making the decision to exempt their taxes because they're at our nonprofit considered, then that's what I'm just saying, that my decision to make it is not necessarily the decision that, the no-brainer decision. Maybe there's a little bit different thought going to it, and maybe it did confuse the situation by being brought that way, but yeah, at the end of the day, if it comes to the same conclusion, then, yep.
Councilor Fagan.
Well, the tax exemption is restricted by the Lloydminster Charter. This is the only thing we have is our charter. And I think that, I think we go into a little bit of dangerous grounds when we start setting precedents, perhaps, on this. I realize the history in the rest of Alberta, but we talk about our charter all the time. So, you know, in my mind, I think we really got to take a look at this and what kind of can of worms are we opening up by this bylaw, and is there going to be other things to follow?
Councilor Baker.
Well, Elizabeth, I couldn't agree more or disagree more than what was just said by Councillor Orson. The copter is not a red herring. Education in Saskatchewan is looked after by Saskatchewan and Lloydminster, not Alberta. It's like health. It's managed by Saskatchewan, not Alberta. That's why we have a charter, so we don't have two provinces telling us what to do. And education is covered under Saskatchewan. All they do is requisition a fund from Alberta for public education for all kids to go to school. So Alberta has nothing to do with this as far as I'm concerned, because we have a boundary. If the charter doesn't mean anything, then maybe we should decide to get rid of the charter and have the provinces back running it like it did 50 years ago. It's a town or a village. That's why the charter is there, and don't ever lose that charter. The city charter says you must own or occupy the property. So you're saying that doesn't matter in Lloydminster. The charter doesn't matter. The project does not meet copter under the charter. We just finished doing a a non-profit, and reworking and making sure our non-profit organizations had a firm report to follow when we were determining who was considered non-profit in the city. And copter's right in that policy that's within the city. So I think we've got to really look at that. Just bear with me, because I made some points on this, Your Worship.
Certainly.
The report states that 25 people attend what may be considered a private school, not due to user restrictions. In the report we were given, it said there was 25 students attended, and you must be of a certain origin to attend. So what you're saying is that we got 25 families that are sending 25 children, or whoever, and I don't know where these children are from. They could be from 50 miles away to the school here, and we want our general taxpayers to pay for that. We have two school systems, a Catholic and a public school system. French immersion is offered in one school, and they're funded according to the rules, the law of the charter and of the province of Saskatchewan, I believe. Alberta, I believe, has put some kind of a cap on the mill rate. I stand to be corrected on that, but that's how our schools are funded, but they're public schools. Anybody can go to those schools. So I have a problem when it's exclusive. So just a select few can go to that school. When you go to schools where there's a hockey academy and other things attached to it, the parents pay a lot of money for the kids to go to those private schools so they can get that training. I really have trouble with us paying for that. Private schools, like I said, are normally funded by families that can afford to send their kids there. It shouldn't be on the backs of the taxpayers. We got two taxes for school education already in the city. Alberta pays a tax, and so does Saskatchewan. But we also pay a blended tax that on every residence that we have in property in the city, we increase the taxes on education so that you can offer, and I stand to be corrected here, Your Worship, because I don't have all the detail, but so we have a balanced educational program for both Saskatchewan and Alberta. I know my house is an older home now, but it cost me 200 and some bucks extra on my tax bill. I'm sure there's people that pay more than that. We already pay a second education tax. Now we're saying, I know it's not a huge amount per capita, but it is 680 bucks per student. And we're expecting the general public of whatever faith, whatever school division they support, to pay extra money to support this third school. If the Alberta government was in charge, which I don't believe they are, in Lloydminster, then they should fund their schools like everybody else and deal with it that way. The threat of somebody tearing the charter apart, that's going to only happen, in my mind, if both provinces agree. So if Saskatchewan agrees, yeah, maybe it could be a children park. We wouldn't be going to court. But right now, the way it stands, there's people who be getting the third education tax in this city. And last but not least, if we go ahead with this, how many other organizations, what if other ethnic groups wanted to start a school? And only their ethnic group could attend. Are you going to fund that one? What other things could go on? I'm not sure. What about homeschooling? There's people at homeschool. Do they get a tax rebate or do they get extra taxes? They pay their taxes like everybody else, as far as I know. So I'm not opposed to school itself. If it's a private school and you want to go to it, you pay the bill. Most of us pay the bill and send our kids to one of the two public systems. So that's all I have to say on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
I think, Councillor Baker, the confusion, you keep calling it a private school. It's a publicly funded school by the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's held by ministerial order that it's a public school. So the province of Alberta and the province of Saskatchewan give funding to them through capital. They pay per student, no different than they pay any other schools. It's a little different here in Lloydminster because we actually pay and then the province makes up the difference or take away the difference. But they get funding from the province of Alberta and the province of Saskatchewan, no different than any other school, public school or the Catholic school. They get a per student ratio. And so to part of saying it's a private school, it's not a private school, it's publicly funded. It's under ministerial order as a public school, no different than Catholic or the public schools.
If I may, when you pay your taxes on your home or I pay mine, you designate where they're going, public or private, or public or Catholic. So in this case, the folks that want the children to go to this school, call it what you like, if it's not inclusive, then it must be a private school. I don't care what you call it.
It is
If
inclusive.
you can't go to it, what is it?
It is, well, you have to be a Francophone descent, from my understanding, to go there. But what I'm saying is, the people that declare public, that their money goes funding to the public, that goes to the province of Alberta, Saskatchewan. A portion of that will make up the funding for the Francophone school. So some of that money goes to them.
I guess if the folks want the kids to go to that school, they should designate their taxes to that school, like everybody else does.
Well, I think what I hear Scott saying, Councillor, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, is that money does actually filter through. As you've indicated, you've got public and Catholic, and that's on everyone's taxes. But if you were a public student attending the Francophone school, there would be money that went from the public realm to the Francophone school. Is that correct, Scott? And the same if I was Catholic and being Catholic and sent my children to that Francophone school, there'd be a portion of the money, tax money that we collect on behalf of the province, which will remind everybody, that's all we do, it's a collection agency. That money would end up at that school.
My understanding from the conversations is that the money would be given per capita, per student to those. So they would get funding for education purposes from the public resource that the province of Alberta would have collected. Councillor Dodge might be able to elaborate a
Yeah,
little bit.
and we don't send a check to them at all.
No.
No, so that's the point as well, right? So we don't collect them forward to them.
No.
And they're not part of the bi-provincial levy as well.
Correct.
So, which is the other part of it. So they don't, the Francophone school gets no dollars from the bi-provincial levy.
The
So
seamless
that was-
levy.
Yeah, seamless levy, pardon me. So when it was set up, that was one of the pieces that was in there as well. I think the other reality is that our language in our charter, if it was changed slightly or modified, as Scott and I talked about a bit about this, we would be no different than any other Alberta community and just simply forward the money and move on with it. We wouldn't be happy with it because the province is really saying they're downloading some of the costs to each of the communities where the school happens to be, unless that school, Francophone school, happens to be an existing school, because then there's no taxes collected for the schools. They're exempt from that process. But the reality is that with the changes in 2015, Edmonton Public, Edmonton Catholic, and other places around the province, even if they're not for Francophone schools, if they're renting a facility, they're not being fully paid for the cost of the lease and the taxes. And that's the change since 2015. And it's been one of those tools to use on the side to force schools to reduce their infrastructure costs and come back and bring everything back into school buildings.
I have to confirm the amount of money they get. I have the letter here from the Executive Director of Capital Planning, and I can't share it with Council because there's some proprietary information and FOIP rules that I was concerned with, but I can confirm that I have went through the amount of funding that was given to the Francophone school and what their lease requirement was, and it doesn't include taxes.
And that's
It is kind of one of the challenges we have. Councilor Forson?
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple things. When I said charter challenge, I didn't mean the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because there's the section that our presenter earlier was talking about how you have the right to the education. So that is the area where the challenge would be. It wouldn't be a challenge to our charter, but a challenge to the Canadian Charter, which would be more costly than $17,000 in taxes. But even on a fundamental level, I understand that not everyone is in favor of this type of school, and whether I am or not is not even that relevant. But at the end of the day, in terms of education options within our city, it provides another option. There could be 25 more families within our community for the fact that that they have this education option. The same as we provide, we provide squash courts, tennis courts, we provide arts and cultural facilities. There's someone else out there who's providing another education option, which could potentially be the reason why you have a particular surgeon in town or something like that. I don't know the answer to that, but at the end of the day, there's more options for education within our community because of this, and I don't think that we're necessary. Well, in my opinion, I think that I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for our community, and all this talk about whether it's public or private, I guess it's debatable to an extent because the Saskatchewan Act is the one that applies within Lloydminster, not the Alberta Act. But at the same time, I get it. It's not that straightforward as much as I was saying before. However, I still really feel strongly that this is something that a bylaw that I can support that even though sets some level of precedent, if that precedent is that while you can potentially get a property tax exemption if you happen to be a school that's approved by a provincial government, I'm okay with setting that precedent because I don't know how many times that one's going to come up.
Councilor.
So just to clarify, is there as much of a worry of a precedent setting under section 313 as there is under 295?
No, the reason I'm suggesting we use 313 is because if we use 295, and let's say June comes and the school says we're no longer staying here, we're getting out of our lease. If we use 295, council has already canceled the taxes and I got no opportunity to go back to the property owner. If we use 313 and they move out, in the bylaw states if it's no longer used as a school, we can tax the property again. So that's the reason I went with the 313. 295 council says taxes are canceled. There's no opportunity for me in 2020 to collect any taxes.
I guess for me, the discussion is kind of leading away from necessarily what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think Councillor Thorson reiterated some of those points is that, Francophone exists to maintain that heritage within our community. It is providing more access, and really we are a community that is inclusive of all. So for me, going forward is not, and I will later again, I'm not going on the education part, but more that it is a non-for-profit. They're not there to, they're there to educate and to provide a service for our community. And if we're under section 313, if we're able to do that and provide that non-profit status and move forward that way, then I'm completely in favor of that. But saying that they're a public entity that is inclusive of all is, I think, an unfair statement. But rather, I'm in favor of the heritage that they provide for their community.
I don't think I'm saying that they're inclusive at all. I'm saying that they're under the act of the minister. They're
Right.
considered a public school,
Okay.
not a private school. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Great.
Thank you, Scott. City Clerk.
No, Scott explained it perfectly about the 313
Perfect.
sections, yeah.
Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I lean towards what Councilor Baker was saying, walking down the street and someone saying, hey, we just subsidized this group $17,000 for 25 students and $680 apiece. Is that a good use of my tax dollars? I don't know the answer yet. I still haven't decided. There's good arguments made around the table. I mean, at the end of the day, this is asking for a first reading. And if it's council's will to grant first reading, that's one thing, and if we do that, you can still have the discussion and debate the second thing. Now, granted, first reading comes with the cost of the city, because then we're going to incur costs of advertising and everything else that goes with it. So just a couple points I wanted to bring up with that. We had to decide that we're not doing it, and we don't grant first reading today, or we do, and we come with some expense, and then don't do it later. It does come with a little bit of a cost that way.
Just to be clear, there's no legal requirement to advertise this bylaw.
No.
This section 144 makes this strictly within council's purview,
Oh, okay.
pursuant to section 313.
Good.
So that answers the question. Any other comments, Councilor?
No.
So I'm actually getting kind of confused now, because if under section 313, it is a nonprofit, and our charter says that we dictate nonprofit to not have to pay taxes, and why is this even a conversation that we're continuing to elaborate on? This is, honestly, under this part of the charter, if this dictates what we're doing, that's what our charter is there for, is to give us direction. And if education aside, if this part of the charter says to do this, then why are we having the conversation? I'm sorry, I'm just confused.
Just so I can maybe button this up, section 312E of the charter says that you have to own and occupy in order to get a tax exemption as a school. Since they don't own and occupy, council or the charter doesn't allow us to give that exemption.
Right.
Section 313 then allows us to provide this exemption. But remember, council's sole purview to provide an exemption comes from section 144 of the charter. So they're not bound to provide an exemption, it's their purview.
Okay.
That's coming at it from the strictly educational piece, not the nonprofits piece.
Any other comments?
So just to
Councilor Batchel.
Yeah, just to put it in a different context, if we don't change this, we're liable to be served. So, because the reality is that if this school is in any other community in Alberta, this bylaw wouldn't even come here. They would be exempt because of the changes to the Municipal Governments Act. And the argument would be simple. It would be saying that if you as an Albertan lived in any part of Alberta, you should have the same access to the legislation and funding, et cetera, as any other Albertan does. And that's the context in which I believe would be brought to the table. Our argument would be that our charter allows us to make these changes. So if we're going to argue against those changes, we're in essence going to be arguing against the Municipal Governments Act. And I'm not sure whether that's going to be worth our time, energy, and money. And I'm guessing it's going to be more than $17,000.
So just so we're clear, if somebody decides to make a challenge based on the Canadian Charter of Freedom, Rights and Freedoms to the Lloydminster Charter, the Lloydminster Charter is an act of Alberta, and they would be challenging the Alberta government on the act, not the city of Lloydminster.
Because, and I believe if we add to that, we didn't create the charter. The charter is our direction, yet it is a provincial act. So, and for a change, we can actually dump it on the provinces and get it back up one level to where it should be dealt with, because they have the control of the charter. And this charter, as we all know, we talk about it quite regularly, but then we dived into it quite deeply today. We do not have the ability of this council of 7 members to change the charter. The charter can only be changed by 2 provincial legislatures at the same time agreeing to the identical charter. So appreciate that, City Council, because the charter is not, it governs us, but it's not our responsibility. If that's the correct way to look at it, it governs us, but we don't control the charter. The charter controls us. And we're not responsible for the contents of the charter per se, as it's laid out in the provincial legislature. Councilor Baker.
Thanks, sir. Over the years, I know that administration, along with councils and certainly our city solicitors, have been part of a negotiation between the two provinces in our charter. And what you see is negotiated. But we don't own it, but we get the right to manage under this charter. If we're not going to follow it, as we asked, then what are the governments going to think? What are they going to say? Well, Woodminster doesn't follow. There's an opt-out clause that says, has nothing to do with this. It says, if you want to forgive some education taxes, you can. We've had cases before this council to reduce education taxes for certain problems people have had. We've said no. And for a lot more money than this. And my question is, if you're not going to defend the charter, then what are you going to defend? Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Councilor. Councilor Monroe.
I'm going to make a motion
I would entertain a motion.
that council grant first reading to bylaw number 05-2020, the Greater North Central Francophone Education Region, number 2, property tax exemption bylaw.
Seconded. Councilor Torst. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Councilor Craig.
I think we should really take a look at this first reading. I'm mixed on this, and I think that we need to take a look on that. There's nothing that's going to change if we go for the first reading, first reading, that there's no change and we can discuss this a little further. That would be my suggestion.
I think that's where that's what the intention of the motion is at this time. Any further questions? Yeah, all clear? Because we are, the motion reads to approve the first reading, but then it would come back.
Sorry, I missed that. Yep.
Okay.
I apologize.
All clear? With that, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, guys. Moving on to agenda item number 7.5.2, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw number 7, 2020, dark, first reading. I'll ask Sam to come forward for a second.
Okay, good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I'm here to present the administration's request or recommendation regarding the downtown area development plan. Our recommendation is that council grant first reading to bylaw 07-2020, being the bylaw to approve the downtown area development plan and direct administration to proceed with final engagements with impacted stakeholders within 1 month of the first reading of this bylaw. In addition, the council established a public hearing to be held at City Hall Council Chambers during the regular council meeting of April 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m. Now, issue. You remember that O2 came in here to make a presentation, that's on February 18th, and that's to GPC. Now, the intent of that is to facilitate the adoption of the downtown area development plan, which its purpose is to deliver a 15-year vision and actionable priorities for the revitalization of the city of Woodminster's downtown. Furthermore, it's intended to provide policy and implementation framework that will guide future public and private investment and land use planning decisions. The background to this is, as I presented last time, the initiation of the DAP was in 2014 by a different council. But in 2018, the proposal was revised and awarded to O2 Planning and Design of Calgary. And following this, council authorized the establishment of a committee, that's the DAP committee, as a public committee to serve as advocacy group for the DAP project, among other duties. The committee met monthly until the plan was presented or completed and draft plan presented to the committee or to the GPC. The phases of the DAP project as listed below. That's from startup to delivery now. We are at phase 5. We're almost done with phase 5. And then moving on to the principles. Now, we have 6 principles. Those guiding principles, I want to underscore them. One is making the downtown the civic heart of the city of Long Beach. 2 is to make the downtown a complete community. 3, to make the downtown a safe and inclusive. 4, to achieve a more vibrant downtown. And 5, to have a downtown that is welcoming and attractive. And lastly, to have a connected and accessible downtown. The goals are as listed. Now, there are 7 land use districts, and I'm going to quickly scroll over to that, that are proposed in this land use, that's the area development plan. This actually condenses the 11 land use districts we have in the downtown, just to make them a lot more legible and a lot more easy to handle. One is the core mixed-use area, which is intended to permit mixed uses and to intensify uses in the downtown core. The number 2 is the mixed-use transition area, extending outwards to 48th Avenue and on the east and 52nd Avenue on the west of the city, which is just to have those mixed-use transition before it gets to the residential component. Then civic land use areas that identify locations for city and institutional buildings and services. And then we have along the rail line as we go up, and maybe later on I'm going to be showing that's the land use district map or the land use concept map. Creative industrial areas, land use area along the rail lines for a mix of light and industrial uses, including incubator industries. And then recognizing and continuing to, at least to intensify the neighborhood residential areas in those that's in the periphery of the downtown, and then highway commercial land uses along the highway, that's on Highway 16, and then open space areas. Now, as outdoor living rooms, not as expensive spaces. Now, that's they have done that, and the proposed actions for implementing the plan are in 3 categories. One of them is the first is to stimulate development in the downtown. 2, to build. That's something that will build action that will lead to building of maybe construction of infrastructures in the downtown, and then activate actions. The stimulate actions are behind the scene tactics, such as adoption of the policy that will make available grants, which are intended to incentivize development and generate economic and social activities. The build actions include capital improvements, such as street improvement, and the development of public open spaces that will motivate private investors to invest in the downtown. And then activate action includes small programming tactics, such as events and activities, which actually is the live wire of the downtown. That's people coming to the downtown and seeing things in the downtown, intended to bring people to the downtown. So administration proposes 3 options. The first option is a council grant first reading to bylaw 07-2020 in the bylaw to approve the downtown area development plan and direct administration to proceed with final engagement. And we are recommending this engagement because we want to go back again to landowners and be able to engage them one more time, just to be sure that we touch everybody. In addition, the council established a public hearing to be held at City Hall Council Chambers during the regular council meeting on April 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m. Then, second, the council order for first reading, and third, the council direct administration to provide additional information. Now, the alignment with strategic plan. This item is in alignment with the following strategic area, downtown revitalization, and I know it's a major area of strategic plan of council to identify and assess growth and development in the downtown by providing a comprehensive plan that will guide revitalization through a collaborative focus on future economic, social, and sustainable opportunities. And governance implication, the approval of the bylaw will allow the city of Lord to provide the regulatory framework act for the revitalization of the downtown. It is intended to ensure that necessary municipal development plan and land use bylaw amendments are made. The budget implication of these 150,000 was budgeted by council, and this was in the 2019 capital budget. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll turn it over to you, Mayor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Senator. Questions, comments? Councilor Monroe.
Just a comment, I guess, over the past week, I have had the opportunity to engage with some of the stakeholders from downtown. Although they haven't had the ability to have a deep dive into the document, they do appreciate a lot of the different aspects that it does have. Looking forward to, if it does pass today, first reading, having that final stage of engagement, just to ensure that you know what they're saying or what they're seeing, and just confirming that with administration and O2. So last week too, I guess I should have mentioned, I don't know how I got forgotten, but really the amount of effort that was put in by our city staff, both your planning departments and you and Freddie and everyone else, and also communications. At the end of some of those engagement sessions, I think that Jessica knew more about the plan than maybe some people that were actually helping to develop the plan. So the amount of effort that was put into communications in getting what the direction was and what we wanted to hear from the community, I couldn't be more proud, I guess, of all the effort that the entire city staff did put in to getting this plan to the stage that is set today. So thank all of you.
Any other additional comments, questions? I think that the plan is a starting point, and without revitalization of our downtown, we could write the history that's been already written by cities around the world that didn't deal with the downtown, because it is the core of the community. It's the first starting point. Downtown started right off the railway tracks. And it started with cattle cars that were hauling the cattle that were raised by farmers in the area, grain elevators, and merchants that carried out trade. And it's grown to a point that we are today, a very vibrant city. But at the same token, business has changed. And I think helping people know where they can invest money downtown and see the future and have clear direction from administration after council approves this, if that's what we go through as we walk through it, will give investors confidence of what they can expect. And it gives residents a reason to consider living downtown if that's what they so choose, because they feel their needs aren't being met. I think this helps provide some confidence that the city values the downtown. What does the downtown look like? We have a conceptual plan, 100 and some odd pages. Councilor Baker likes to look at reports, and I appreciate that very much. It's a start, and I think it will grow with our community, and our community is looking for input, and I think this will give the opportunity for the people that are downtown today. And I hope they stay for a long time, and maybe another generation will take over a family business, or we'll see someone say, there's an opportunity in Lloydminster, and we want to invest. So I think this will lead to that, as well as making it home downtown, and to get us going in the right direction. Because if we don't, I had the chance to visit Detroit, and I wasn't there when it was real ugly, but my sons have explained to me what it took and how it took to have a rebirth, and they're still going through rebirth, and I don't want to go through what Detroit went through, and I don't expect instead to be Detroit, but that is one interesting city when you look at what happens when you forget about the downtown. So I think it's something we have to be cognizant of. We're much smaller, but it's an important part of our community, and it's got history, just as we've talked about in other facets today, but I believe this is an opportunity to move forward.
I'd just like to also commend the number of people that volunteered to sit on the committee as well and be part of this process. And, I'm not sure all the names. I know a couple people, but I'm sure I speak for everybody who would say thank you. It takes time, it takes commitment, and people that are really interested in this kind of work, and not everybody is. And so I'm appreciative of the fact that the energy and the commitment that has been shown. Councilor Monroe has been involved, and when you look at the document, there are a lot of pieces in there, as well even the city administration on anticipating some of the pieces that might come forward relative to, do you start doing the roads 50th, or do you wait for the dark to look at maybe some of the enhancements of the sidewalk sizes and all those other pieces as well. So I think everybody's marching to that and to the same drum, if you like, and it's going to be interesting to see how these pieces begin to come together. So thanks to you, Sam, and Councilor Monroe, and everybody else who's on the committee. Appreciate it.
Any other comments? Councilor Baker.
Your Worship, I'm sure, hopefully this will ask the important thing with that report, that it doesn't go on the shelf someplace. That we got too many reports like that, what's happened to them. Somehow, as I read this, and I read it 2 or 3 times over the last year, if we could find a location where you can put your plans and designs behind glass so that they're on public display all the time. And it might be in more than one spot in the city. So people get used to what you're trying to do rather than in a book in City Hall. You know what I mean? Like, people just forget about it. It gets hidden. I don't know where we can do that even, but you know what I mean? If it's a map on the wall, people can see it on a regular basis and make sure that it's displayed on a regular, full-time, at different locations. I don't know how that would work, but I'm sure somebody can figure that out. Just so that people, when they come to town, they can see what you're trying to do, and hopefully it'll generate a little bit of interest, or more interest in the project.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. One thing we recommended is actually to have a draft implementation plan, which is going to be following this to ensure that we actually keep our eyes on the ball, not just put it back somewhere. Because we had one in 1988, we didn't do anything.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it all.
Like you said, Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just from the presentation that we got last week and everything, there's a lot that I like about this job. Mainly that there is a variety of options and things you can do at different price points and things you can do right away. And I think from everything I saw, they're all items that would have kind of an immediate effect on the downtown overall. So, and then there are the long-term things that you can start planning for and what happens over the course of time with development and things like that. All of those are really good to have too. You know, as different buildings in the downtown age, not all of them have necessarily important historical significance or context. So, you know, the ones that don't, it'll be good to have a kind of a standard out there so that redevelopment can happen in an orderly fashion and give us a downtown we can be really proud of. So, another thing that, you know, it's going to be really useful, I think, even to, after we do this first reading, is getting all of that feedback back from those individuals who have put a lot of input into this and make sure that, you know, there's nothing that we missed that was really critical, or if there's any other things that can be kind of last minute highlights to it, you know, that'd be great to hear back on, or from the stakeholders that put a lot of effort into this, to make sure that everyone's getting kind of what we thought we were getting out of this. Although, from my perspective, it does look pretty good, so thank you.
Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll echo my fellow councilors' compliments on everybody that was involved in the process for sure, and just add that if a developer came to Woodminster today and wanted to develop a big building or a number of buildings in the downtown, the answer we have for them is, I don't know if it fits the plan. And that's the answer that's been sitting there for some time. I don't know if it fits. This gives us the fit. This tells us what we're going to do going forward, and it gives the developer the opportunity to do that, revitalize the downtown. So it's great to have a plan. But if somebody comes in and says, I'm going to build a 10-story high-rise down there, oh, no, actually that doesn't fit, or yes, it absolutely does fit. Way better than we have today. So it's great to have some direction, and look forward to the next number of years of seeing that revitalization.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Not seeing any coming out, I will look for direction from council on bylaw number 07-2020, downtown area redevelopment plan, first reading.
Yeah, sure.
Councilor Thorson.
Move that council grant first reading to bylaw number 07-2020, being a bylaw to approve the downtown area redevelopment plan and direct administration to proceed with a final engagement and impact stakeholders within 1 month of the first reading of this bylaw. In addition, that council establish a public hearing to be held in City Hall Council Chambers during the regular council meeting on April 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m.
Thank you, Councilor. Good. Second. Councilor Monroe. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Sam, great work. Moving on to agenda item 7.4 and 7.3, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 7.5.3, bylaw number 8, 2020, fire hall borrowing bylaw, first reading. I'll ask the CFO, Denise McDonald.
Thanks, Council. Before you is the fire hall borrowing bylaw. Just keep in mind that this establishes, this is a bookkeeping item, it establishes the estimate at 8.5 and the borrowing maximum at 5.3 for 20 years. We can borrow anything below those thresholds. With that, I ask that Council grant first reading to bylaw 8, 2020 with a maximum borrowing amount of 5.3 million for the City of Lloydminster's fire hall construction. Further, that Council direct administration to advertise and propose borrowing bylaw 8, 2020 for 2 consecutive weeks prior to second and third reading as legislated. November 25th, Council first approved the capital budget for this construction of a new fire hall in the amount of 8.5 million. The budget was established with a portion from taxation and the remainder from borrowing. Municipal requirements for capital borrowing indicate construction cannot commence until the borrowing bylaw is passed. In the 2020 budget, Council approved the construction. Therefore, administration proposes bylaw 8, 2020 in the amount of 5.3 million for 20 years at a maximum rate of 5%. The Alberta Capital Financing Authority's current interest rate is set at, for 10-year borrowing is 2.052 and a 20-year borrowing is 2.325. So there's sufficient threshold there to cover us if rates go higher. And then I've listed some semi-annual payments there for your information. The principal amount of the outstanding debt of the city at December 31st, 2019 is $32,853,806, and no parts of the principal or interest are in arrears. With that, I ask if you have any questions.
Thank you, CFO. Questions or comments? It was a little while ago since we approved borrowing $40 million. We haven't touched it yet, thank goodness, but it will come. But I think this is a process, as the CFO outlined, that for administration to move this project forward, we need to secure the funding to ensure that we can do that. And I'm supportive of it. I think anyone that's been in fire hall number 1 knows that, and again, going back to building reports, we've shared that with the community numerous times. The building is beyond renovations and additional money spent in good order. And again, in good conscience, even better than not spending money there. So I think that this moves the process forward.
Make a motion if that's allowed.
Just
One comment from Council Thorson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, my comment was just around, it's kind of interesting that we ended up getting, maybe it was by design, 3 of the buildings that were within the buildings report that we received back in the fall. This is kind of moving the ball forward on this one. But when you look at the other ones that we've been dealing with, it's one, there's potentially no city use. The other one is, maybe we can move it or do we shut it down, and there's another discussion there. And this one is one of those municipal services that we absolutely have to have. So, in the grand scheme of things, is getting pushed forward a little bit quicker in terms of the one that we need to replace right away. So definitely supportive of a borrowing bylaw. In this case, this is just a way of managing the funds and not putting too big of a spike on taxpayers this year, because otherwise that would have to be the option if it's not funded partially by debt, then we would have to fund it all with property taxes, and that would just mean that there was a larger peak in the current year, whereas, trying to smooth out what we do from a financial perspective. So I think this is a good use of debt in this case, so we can have access to this facility that we absolutely need, but don't necessarily have to save the money to get there first, or don't take a significant bump in property taxes in the current year. So thank you. I think it's a good idea to take a certain level of debt on.
Okay, Council. I'll entertain that motion. downtown, Councilor, if you so wish.
Move that council grant first reading of bylaw number 08-2020 with a maximum borrowing amount of $5.3 million for the city of Lloydminster's fire hall construction. Further, the council direct administration to advertise the proposed borrowing bylaw number 08-2020 for 2 consecutive weeks prior to second and third reading as legislated.
Seconder, Councilor Diachat. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 8. My mayor's report is attached for a period of late December or mid-December through January into early February. Certainly had an opportunity to have a great Christmas break. I hope, as we talked about some of these already, we attended a couple of meetings and conferences as council and had a chance to attend the one that I wanted to highlight was the Heartland Economic Conference in Edmonton. We often, I think I mentioned this before the council, $40 billion invested in the industrial heartland of Alberta. And the intention is to invest another $30 billion. And I won't get into the current news of today. There's lots of news of all sorts that have come out over the weekend and different things, but certainly economic development is key. And we talk about that around this council table, including our own downtown redevelopment. So from that perspective, certainly lots of activities again in our community. The exhibition held a great agribusiness exhibits over 2 days in mid-February. We've got some other things going on. Again, service clubs that have celebrated anniversaries in our community and organizations, which is greatly appreciated. And I just wanted to highlight the Kindness Wins shirts that were supplied to us by the Lloydminster Co-op to highlight anti-bullying and the things that need to go on in our community. We all have a piece to play in that, from adults to children, throughout, even in our own workplaces. It's not an acceptable practice, and I think we need to take that opportunity to express that and share that with people. From that perspective, like I say, it's been another busy 2 months back after Christmas, almost 2 months, and it sure seems to be flying by rather quickly. I'll look to council if anyone else had anything they wanted to add in particular to their council reports. Not seeing any, I will move to see if there's any other matters that this council needs to deal with this time.
There is just one matter, and it's just to bring council information back on a matter that was brought forward for the February 10th council meeting, an update on the AFRAC radio purchase for the fire services. Administration has reviewed this process and will be moving forward in the near future with an RFP to acquire these items.
Thank you. That'll be a public RFP.
It will be a public RFP.
Thank you. With that, I will ask one more time, any other matters? Not seeing any, I'll look to inquiries from the media, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today we have requests for yourself, Mayor Albers, Councillor Buckingham, and Councillor Torreson.
I'll look for a motion to recess. Seconded by Councilor Beckman. All in favor? Carried.